Anyone who's had experience with Alzheimer's disease knows the agony of watching someone fade away as it steals memory and, at the end, a person's own identity. Tonight, we'll show you an experimental way to try and beat back Alzheimer's. It's been tested on just a handful of patients, but it caught our attention because of the doctor involved, Dr. Ali Rezai, who 60 Minutes first met 20 years ago. Dr. Rezai is a neuroscience pioneer who's developed treatments for Parkinson's disease and other brain disorders. Over the last year, we followed this master of the mind as he attempted to delay the progression of Alzheimer's disease and its worst symptoms using ultrasound. We saw a cutting-edge approach to brain surgery with no cutting.
If we can, we should not be doing brain surgery.
You're a brain surgeon.
I am, but I should be out of a job because brain surgery, it's cutting the skin, opening the skull. It can be barbaric.
You're gonna go right in there.
It looked like a scene from a sci-fi movie.
Okay. Just to make it a little bit more comfortable.
A halo-wrapped patient pushed into a tube
We're ready to go.
as a team of doctors manipulate his brain from the other side of the glass.
Gain high, modulate power, 3 minutes. Okay, we're ready to go.
Dr. Ali Rezai allowed us to witness his revolutionary attempt to use ultrasound to slow down the cognitive decline in 3 patients diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. It's never been done before.
There's no miracle cures here. It's advancing medicine with calculated risks and pushing the frontiers. So we're targeting these areas.
Dr. Rezai and his team are focused on these red patches in the patient's brain scans. The red indicates the densest beta amyloid protein. That gummy protein is believed to play a major role in Alzheimer's by disrupting communication between brain cells.
In people with Alzheimer's, it accumulates much faster. And over time, these protein aggregates, we call them plaques, like plaques in the arteries, they keep on accumulating and impacting function.
There are 2 FDA-approved drugs on the market that can help break up that brain plaque. Aducanumab was approved in 2021, followed by lecanemab last year. Both are given intravenously, but they work slowly.
Typically, you go into the clinic and you get an IV and you have the antibody infusion over 1 to 2 hours. And you have to do it once a month or twice a month for 18 months and longer. And during those 12 to 18 months, the brain is continuing to progress. Alzheimer's is not going away.
It takes so long because the drugs have a hard time getting through something called the blood-brain barrier. This tight filter of cells line the blood vessels to keep toxins from leaking into the brain, but it also prevents almost all of the medication from getting in too.
We think that that's what's causing the BB disruption by opening this here.
Dr. Rezai thought he could solve that problem with ultrasound. The same technology that's been used for 70 years to give doctors a view of organs and fetal development.
Just an inch. Good. You're good. Come back.
He chose ultrasound because it easily penetrates the skull and can be focused, like sunlight through a magnifying glass, to help open the blood-brain barrier and allow the drugs to rush in.
This way, we're getting the payload, the therapeutic payload, exactly to the area it needs to go with a high penetration. But we got to be careful because we want to be safe about this. You don't want to deliver too much. Don't want to open the blood-brain barrier too much.
Because if you open it too much, what could happen?
You can get bleeding in the brain, you can get swelling in the brain, you can get many other problems. So you have to get it just right.
We will show you exactly how that worked and the early results in a minute. But to understand why one of the country's most accomplished brain surgeons is betting on ultrasound,
Okay, open and close your hands for me.
you have to go back to 2002, when Dr. Rezai first caught our attention in a story Morley Safer reported on treating Parkinson's disease.
Look up. Show me your teeth. Stick a tongue out. Very good.
Dr. Rezai was among the first to implant a pacemaker-type device in the brain, which stopped uncontrollable movements suffered by Parkinson's patients.
It's like traveling through a labyrinth, as in the Greek myth. And around every corner, you have that bloodthirsty monster that can jump on you. So you want to be careful to avoid these areas.
That kind of implant surgery is now routine for advanced Parkinson's. Dr. Rezai went on to write hundreds of scientific papers, secure dozens of patents, and present his Parkinson's research to Congress and the White House. He could have gone to any big city research center, but true to form, he chose to try something different and moved to Morgantown, West Virginia, where he is the executive director of the Rockefeller Neuroscience Institute.
It was a fantastic move because we're able to achieve so many things that would have been difficult at other institutions. Sometimes in the bigger institutions, you may not be hungry as much for it. You may have 1,000 different agendas and priorities. Here, we think we have a very nimble and agile team that can quickly get outcomes.
Like in 2019.
Okay.
This is video Dr. Rezai's team took when they were among the first to use ultrasound to treat tremors. For 15 years, Dan Wall had been suffering from essential tremor, a neurological disorder.
You okay? Yep. You got a hat on now. Okay. All right, very good.
Rezai's team focused ultrasound into a part of the brain called the thalamus to destroy a pinpoint-sized patch of tissue doctors believed was responsible for the tremors.
These are the 980 elements converging right there.
Wall was awake during the procedure.
Touch my finger with your finger.
After 2 hours, the 71-year-old's tremor was gone.
I'm still afraid I'm gonna drop it.
You got it.
I've got it.
Really good.
You want to show them?
Yeah.
Wow.
Praise the Lord.
That success helped convince Dr. Rezai that focused ultrasound could be adapted to patients with other brain disorders, including Alzheimer's disease.
My first symptoms that I noticed were that I was having trouble typing at work.
Did you think you had Alzheimer's?
No, I didn't.
Dan Miller is just 61 years old. His wife, Kathy, began noticing changes 4 years ago.
He kind of hit it pretty well. And then I noticed he was having trouble, his clothes would be backwards. And those kinds of things.
Just little things.
Just little things, yes.
A scan of his brain revealed what Dan had been hiding.
Mr. Miller had a very large amounts of beta amyloid.
The red spots indicated a buildup of those beta amyloid proteins, the so-called brain plaque, a marker of Alzheimer's. Dr. Rezai explained to Miller he couldn't cure him of the disease, but he hoped to slow its progression.
Why take part in the trial if it's not a cure?
I have to explain to you that I was at the point, like in Dante's Inferno, where it says, abandon all hope, you who enter here. For me, it was just, let's do this, What do I have to lose?
And you are infusion, sir.
Here's how it worked. Hours before the procedure, Miller was given an IV treatment of aducanumab, one of those 2 new drugs to reduce beta amyloid plaque. Miller was then fitted with this $1 million helmet, similar to the one the team used to treat tremor patients. It directs nearly 1,000 beams of ultrasound energy at a target the size of a pencil point.
Basically, the patient lies on the MRI table, and the head goes inside the helmet. And the patient is immobilized with a halo or with a mouthpiece because we don't want movements to cause errors in our targeting in the brain. Is that comfortable? Thumbs up?
Once inside, the MRI machine gave Dr. Rezai a 3D view of the plaque he would target in Dan Miller's brain. The next step was an IV solution that contained microscopic bubbles. When hit with ultrasound energy, the bubbles pry open that blood-brain barrier.
Okay, ready? We can sonic it now. There we go. The bubbles start vibrating.
They're moving.
They're moving. They start expanding. So you can open the barrier temporarily. Now it's open for 24 to 48 hours, and then it reseals. So this gives you a tremendous opportunity for 24 to 48 hours with the barrier being open. So now therapeutics can get inside the brain.
You can't hear ultrasound. That noise is a signal to tell Rezai's team the ultrasound is doing its work.
Very nice. Opening of the blood-brain barrier. Each dot represents an area where all the waves, all the ultrasound waves converge and open the blood-brain barrier.
So this is just one blast, if you will.
One blast getting there.
And you're hitting one point.
One point, and then it moves to the next one.
Even though patients were awake, they told us they didn't feel a thing. It all took a couple of hours, and they went home when it was over. The 3 patients were given the treatments of ultrasound with infusion once a month over 6 months.
That's another target right there.
The result? Beta amyloid plaque targeted with ultrasound were reduced 50% more than areas treated by infusion alone.
That's the top of the head right there.
Dr. Rezai shared the 3 patients' brain scans with us.
And the red indicates more density of beta amyloid plaques in the brain. So you can see as you treat it with ultrasound.
Look closely at the areas outlined in white that were targeted with ultrasound and the drug.
You get reduction.
Whoa, that's
right
after.
There. That's after. You can see the plaques are very significantly reduced by opening the blood-brain barrier just in one area.
Have you lay back?
Dan Miller and the 3rd patient in the trial had larger areas of their brain targeted with ultrasound.
And this is his baseline, and then you can see here after 26 weeks, there's a very dramatic reduction in the beta amyloid in the areas as outlined by this white mark.
And now we're going to look at patient number 3.
And this patient underwent antibody infusion therapy plus ultrasound. You can see this area, which is really amazing. The ultrasound opened the blood-brain barrier and the antibody went in faster and cleaned out the plaques.
What was your reaction when you saw this scan?
I mean, my jaw dropped. I'm like, whoa. I was actually even in the clinic seeing patients, and the PET scan technician called and said, oh yeah, there's a big change. I'm like, how do you know? We have to analyze it. He's like, no, you can see it on the screen. So,
what did you think when Dr. Rezai shared the scans with you?
It was surreal.
You can really see it. You don't have to be a doctor to understand what's going on there.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Even the red is decreasing.
That's amazing.
Kathy Miller says she can see it in her husband, too, who slips up once in a while, but hasn't slipped further away.
He has trouble finding things. I'll send him into the kitchen to get something, and he's like, it's not there. And I'm like, yes, it is. I can see it, but he can't see it. But if that's the worst, that's nothing.
You'll take it.
I'll take it.
Do you feel hopeful about the future?
I do, yes. I learned that what I needed to do is accept that the old Dan is gone, and then start working on the new me, which has a future.
Dr. Rezai's team told us there's been no change in the ability of the 3 patients to do their daily activities since the ultrasound treatments ended in July. Now that Dr. Rezai has shown focus ultrasound can clear beta amyloid plaques faster, he has FDA approval to use ultrasound to try and restore brain cell function lost to Alzheimer's. What's the result of breaking up all those plaques to the damage that's already been done to the brain?
We don't know if it's going to reverse the damage to the brain because Alzheimer's, the underlying cause is still occurring. So we have another study that we're looking at with ultrasound. First, clear the plaques, then deliver ultrasound in a different dose to see now if we can reverse it or boost the brain more for people with Alzheimer's.
When we come back, we'll show you Dr. Rezai's new way to use ultrasound to reset the brain and help people suffering from drug addiction. The human brain contains 100 billion neurons. That's as many cells as there are stars across the Milky Way. Dr. Ali Rezai has spent 25 years exploring this frontier of medicine. The surgical techniques and therapies he pioneered are in use around the world. Dr. Rezai allowed us to see his latest research over the last year at the Rockefeller Neuroscience Institute in Morgantown, West Virginia. It includes revolutionary treatments for a brain disease suffered by 24 million Americans, addiction. The results so far have been life-changing for the people we met once trapped by drugs.
Looking back, I didn't have a chance.
What do you mean you didn't have a chance?
I couldn't do anything without having that drug in my system.
Jared Buckhalter is the son of a coal miner. At 6'3", he was a high school football standout who dreamed of playing wide receiver at Penn State. But after a shoulder injury, he got hooked on painkillers.
The very first time that I took that first pill, I knew that I wanted that feeling for the rest of my life.
What did it feel like?
It's just pure euphoria.
He took us to where he said he often went to buy drugs, including heroin.
Everybody in Morgantown knows to come here. It's probably 17, 18 years old, just a kid.
Buckhalter still looks like an athlete. It's hard to imagine he was an addict for more than 15 years. He told us he does not remember how many times he overdosed and that he couldn't stay clean for more than 4 days at a time.
I didn't know where I was going to sleep some nights. My family didn't want me around anymore. I did so many things to hurt them that, it was just too much for them to deal with.
4 years ago, a psychologist who'd worked with Buckhalter introduced him to Dr. Ali Rezai, who was gearing up to perform a new kind of brain surgery to treat severe addiction.
Our protocol was people that have failed everything.
Once you've tried everything.
Everything. Residential programs, multiple failures. Detox multiple times. Outpatient, inpatient, multiple overdoses.
I think he classified it as end-stage drug user.
End stage makes you think that this is the end of your life.
Correct. And hearing that at the age of 34, it was crazy.
Bring the DBS electrode in.
Dr. Rezai thought he might be able to adapt technology he helped develop years earlier to treat Parkinson's disease to treat people with severe addiction.
We've been able to map out with neuroscience, imaging, there's a specific part of the brain that is electrically and chemically malfunctioning that is associated with addiction.
So it's not just willpower, it's what's happening in the brain.
It's a brain disease. It's an electrical and chemical abnormality in the brain that occurs over time with recurrent use of drugs. And this can be any substances, alcohol, can be opioids, amphetamines, cocaine, and they all are involving the same part of the brain.
And so your idea was what with the implant?
Parkinson's, we implant that in the movement part of the brain that is electrically malfunctioning, causing shaking. In this case, we're going in the behavioral regulation, anxiety, and craving parts of the brain.
Dr. Rezai has seen the impact of addiction in his community. The problem is so severe in Morgantown, a vending machine dispenses the overdose antidote, Narcan, for free.
You got your baselines?
The National Institute on Drug Abuse agreed to support Dr. Rezai's attempt to fight addiction with a brain implant. In 2019, the FDA gave him a green light to attempt the groundbreaking surgery.
Change the cover, please.
That is Jared Buckhalter. He agreed to be the first addiction patient in the U.S. to get the implant. Dr. Rezai's team interviewed him the day before the surgery.
The best outcome possible would be, just to cut the cravings out and make me feel a little bit better. If those couple things happen, that's all I could possibly ask for. At that time, I was so desperate for a better life that I was willing to do just about anything, and I signed up to do it.
I think some people might look at this and think an electronic implant in the brain sounds a little creepy.
People, maybe 50 years ago, they say an implant in the heart sounds creepy. Now it's like normal. 25 years ago, people are saying, what are you doing? You're putting an implant in the brain for Parkinson's? But now it is routine, part of standard of care for advanced Parkinson's.
This is video from the 7-hour procedure.
I'm ready when you are.
Surgery so new, it didn't have a name yet. Dr. Rezai opened a nickel-sized hole in Buckhalter's skull. Then he directed a thin wire with 4 electrodes deep inside.
Jared, are you okay? Yes, sir. All right.
Jared was awake during the surgery. Why was that necessary?
To map the brain, we have tiny microphones the size of a hair we put inside the brain, and they're going slowly with micro robots. They go at increments of 1,000th of a millimeter. Very slow. We drive them into the brain, and we're listening to the neurons talking to each other. In addiction, we want to find the area in the reward center. So that confirms where we are in the brain. Once we listen, we say, okay, that's the right sound. Then we put the final therapeutic pacemaker.
What does it sound like?
Static electricity, which may be electricity to you, but is music to my ears.
Music because Dr. Rezai says it's a signal that he found the right spot in the brain for the implant. Once in place, the wire was connected to a device placed below the collarbone.
Okay.
The electrical pulses it sends to the brain are intended to suppress cravings. Buckhalter said it was painless. Post-surgery, the system is adjusted remotely with a tablet computer as needed.
When they turned the unit on, it was an immediate change.
What was the change?
Just felt better, just felt like I did prior to ever using drugs, but a little bit better. And it was at that point that I knew that I was going to have a legitimate shot at doing well.
In all, 4 patients with severe drug addiction had the implant surgery. 1 had a minor relapse. Another dropped out of the trial completely. But 2 have been drug-free since their operations, including Jared Buckhalter, who's been clean for 4 years.
If you hadn't met Dr. Rezai, if you hadn't gone through this implant, do you think you'd be sitting here talking to me today?
You may be talking to my parents, those that have lost their loved ones to a drug overdose, but you wouldn't be talking to me. There's no doubt about that.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah.
The surgery was a success, but opening someone's skull is always risky. Dr. Rezai thought he could reach more patients quickly if he used ultrasound. He was already using it to treat other brain disorders and was convinced focused ultrasound could target the same area of the brain as the implant.
Is this brain surgery without a knife?
It is, indeed. So there's no skin cutting, there's no opening the skull. So it is brain surgery without cutting the skin, indeed.
Now this is just the measuring part, right?
Dr. Rezai explained how his team would be the first to treat addicts by aiming hundreds of beams of ultrasound to a precise point deep inside the brain.
So the area that we're treating is the reward center in the brain, which is the nucleus accumbens, which is right down at the base of this dark area. And then we deliver ultrasound waves to that specific part of the brain, and we watch how acutely on the table your cravings and your anxiety changes in response to ultrasound.
How is the ultrasound making a change here?
Ultrasound energy is changing the electrical and chemical milieu or activity in this structure in the brain involving addiction and cravings.
Just resetting them and giving them kind of a fresh start?
At this point, it seems like the brain is being reset or rebooting of the brain, and the cravings are less, they're managed, anxiety is better. So now that allows them to interact with the therapist. It's very important to know that this is not a cure, but an augmentation of the therapy by reducing the cravings and anxiety that's so overwhelming that the therapist has difficulty working with the patient.
Last February, we watched Dr. Rezai use focused ultrasound to treat Dave Martin, who told us he's been surrounded by friends and family who used drugs his whole life.
When did you start using drugs?
When I was 7 years old.
7?
Yes. I did drugs for 37 years.
What kind of drugs were you using?
Anything I can get my hands on.
Inside the MRI, Martin was shown these images of drug use to stoke his cravings.
His legs were moving a lot and he's very agitated.
A simultaneous brain scan allowed Dr. Rezai and his team to immediately spot the area in the nucleus accumbens that was most active.
I'd like to see the targets one more time.
90 watts of ultrasound energy were beamed at a target the size of a gumdrop.
Ready? Sonicate.
All right, there we go.
Within minutes, we noticed Martin's foot that had been anxiously bouncing was still. And he told Rezai's team that those same images of drugs he was shown earlier were now not sparking the need for a fix.
Heroin is going down. Meth is also going down. Marijuana is down.
Marijuana's down?
A lot, actually.
Good. Keep on sonicating.
The day of the procedure, it was the best day of my life. I didn't experience the same effect as like the times before.
You didn't feel like I need that, I want that?
No, I didn't feel like I needed the urge or the desire to use wasn't there anymore.
So within 15 to 20 minutes of treatment, their craving and anxiety melts away. And we're seeing this pattern in multiple instances.
Then they can walk away after this?
They get off the table and go home.
And how long does this entire procedure
1 hour.
take? 1 hour.
1 hour.
Have you been around people still using drugs?
Yes, unfortunately I have.
And what happens?
It didn't even trigger me. I used to use intravenously with needles, and it was a little while ago, not too far back, but this one individual was trying to hit herself and they couldn't hit. And they asked me, can you hit me?
So you actually put drugs in
I actually
this person?
stuck them, drew the blood back. You know, now before when I drew the blood back, it would like make me sweat because I couldn't wait to hit myself. But this time it was just like, God, I hope they don't OD and I kill them here, you know. But I didn't have any urges or desire or anything, so.
Dr. Rezai's team told us Dave Martin did admit to taking one pain-killing pill at a party in December. Still, 10 of the 15 patients in the ultrasound clinical trials have remained completely drug-free. Dr. Ali Rezai is trying the same ultrasound therapy on 45 more addiction patients and is already thinking about expanding the use of ultrasound to help people with other brain disorders,
I want to get a VAS here.
including post-traumatic stress disorder and obesity.
Let's do it again. Yeah. This is serious business. Research never been done before. We have to learn more. We have to replicate our findings.
Is there any risk at running towards something quickly?
There's always risk, but you cannot advance and make discoveries without risk. But we need to push forward and take the risk because people with addiction and Alzheimer's is not going away. It's here. So why wait 10, 20 years? Do it now.
The long war on cancer has left us well short of victory. Radiation flashed on in the 19th century, chemotherapy began to drip in the 20th, but for so many, 100 years of research adds up to just a few more months of life. Well, tonight, you're about to see a discovery for the 21st century that may be a big leap forward, awakening the power of the body's immune system. For 10 months, we've been inside an experimental therapy at Duke University. Some of the patients there use words that doctors don't use, like miracle and cure. And that's remarkable because these patients were handed a death sentence, a relentless brain cancer called glioblastoma. To beat it, researchers are doing something that many thought was crazy. They're infecting the tumors with polio, the virus that has crippled and killed for centuries. In just a moment, polio will be dripped into the brain of 58-year-old Nancy Justice. Her glioblastoma tumor was discovered in 2012. Surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation bought her 2.5 years, but the tumor came roaring back. Now, the virus in this syringe, which mankind has fought to eradicate from the earth, is the last chance she has in the world.
You might feel a little tug, depending on.
In October this past year, half a teaspoon of polio flowed into her tumor.
Okay.
Ready to go?
Are you ready to go?
I'm ready. Bring it on.
We're starting. 9:21.
If you feel anything, you let us know.
I will, definitely.
Perfect.
Well, let me ask, do you feel anything?
No. So far, so good. Don't feel a thing.
Her husband, Greg, constantly inflates a buoyant optimism to save him from the weight of the unknown. Glioblastoma was diagnosed in the 21st year of the Georgia couple's marriage, just as they could make out the finish line for Zach and Luke at college. Her tumor can double in size every 2 weeks, and when glioblastoma returns, time is short. Doctors gave her 7 months, but good ones, maybe just 3 or 4.
The tumor was aggressive, so
Yes.
you wanted an aggressive treatment.
Yes, yes.
You're a medical explorer. Does it feel that way to you?
I'm taking it one day at a time. It sounds very lofty to say medical explorer, but you know, throughout all of this, if this gives other people hope, I'm all for it.
Greg, you mentioned that Nancy was there for every important event in the boys' lives,
Right.
but there are a lot of important events to come.
Exactly.
What do you hope to see?
So I am going to see those boys walk across the stage at their college graduation. I am going to see them get married, and I am going to see grandkids, preferably in that order. And I know it's like such a mom bucket list, but I'll love every minute of it.
It was the day before that we saw Nancy preceded by her shield, the smile that she rarely lets slip.
I'm ready.
Nancy was wheeling into an intricate surgery to insert a path for the virus. That white mass is the tumor, back of her skull, near the top. Duke's chief of neurosurgery, Dr. John Sampson, used 3D MRIs to plot his course. He tacked between the lime green strands that connect to every vital function in her body, and he brought the catheter to the center of the lethal mass.
It's just like a sniper's bullet. If it doesn't go to the right place, it's not going to hit the target. And it's not only important to get it to the right place, but also to make sure that it doesn't go to the wrong places, doesn't cause any harm to the patient.
It doesn't travel throughout the brain.
It won't travel too far throughout the brain because it's a relatively big molecule, and the brain's a tight space, so it's limited in how far it can travel.
At least, that's what they expected, as Nancy became the 17th patient in the experiment. The polio infusion was slow. That half a teaspoon took 6.5 hours. But that's it. One dose, and she's done. No more surgery, chemo, radiation, nothing. If this works.
You're doing fantastic.
All right. And show me your smile.
On Nancy's way home that same day, oncologist Dr. Anit Desjardins showed her how it went.
So we can exactly see where the polio virus went. So that's the MRI you and I looked at on Monday. Then you see here, the brighter area there. Can you see that?
Yes.
That's the polio virus.
Wow.
Exactly where we needed it.
Oh, cool.
Right where it should be.
In a few months, they'll take another MRI to see which is stronger, glioblastoma or polio.
The number of calls are increasing.
This is Duke's polio team. As usual in such studies, several of them have a financial stake, so they'll benefit too if it becomes commercial. Can you pick out the deputy director of the Brain Tumor Center? Well, when you're one of the world's leading cancer doctors, turns out you can wear what you like. And after 34 years, folks at Duke are used to how Dr. Henry Friedman's brain views fashion.
Really good to see that this is going well.
It was Friedman who encouraged Nancy Justice to gamble on the polio experiment.
I wonder, of all the trials and all of the theories and all of the treatments that you have hoped for all of these years, how does this stack up?
This, to me, is the most promising therapy I've seen in my career, period.
A turning point in cancer care?
I hope so. I think it may well be.
Why would he say that during an early clinical trial with barely enough patients to fill an elevator? Because of the decades of work that have led to this moment. The virus is the creation of, the obsession of, Dr. Matthias Gromeyer, a molecular biologist who's been laboring over this therapy 25 years, the last 15 at Duke.
When you went to your colleagues and said, I've got it, we'll use the polio virus to kill cancer, what did they say?
Well, I got a range of responses from crazy to you're lying to all kinds of things. Most people thought it just was too dangerous.
I thought he was nuts. I mean, I really thought that what he's using is a weapon that produces paralysis.
Other researchers are experimenting with cancer treatments using viruses including HIV, smallpox, and measles. But polio was Dr. Gromeyer's choice because, as luck would have it, it seeks out and attaches to a receptor that is found on the surface of the cells that make up nearly every kind of solid tumor. It's almost as if polio had evolved for the purpose. Gromeyer re-engineered the polio virus by removing a key genetic sequence. The virus can't survive this way, so he repaired the damage with a harmless bit of cold virus. This new modified virus can't cause paralysis or death because it can't reproduce in normal cells. But in cancer cells, it does. And in the process of replicating, it releases toxins that poison the cell. Duke went to the FDA for approval of this new Frankenstein virus.
They were afraid you might create a monster.
They were afraid we might create something which could infect the general community. I mean, look at me, I'm a scientist, I'm a physician, and I said, this is nuts. I think that their reaction was appropriate.
To satisfy the FDA, they did 7 years of safety studies. Tests on 39 monkeys proved they didn't get polio. And in 2011, the FDA approved a trial in humans. Someone, had to go first. It's a hell of a thing to be told that you have months to live when you're 20 years old. In 2011, Stephanie Lipscomb was a nursing student with headaches. A doctor came in to say that she had this glioblastoma tumor, the size of a tennis ball.
I looked at the nurse that was sitting there holding my hand, and I said, I don't understand, like, what did he just say? It's kind of hard for me to process.
You had 98% of the tumor removed.
Exactly.
As much radiation as you can have in a lifetime, and chemotherapy.
Exactly.
And then in 2012, what did the doctors tell you?
Your cancer's back.
With recurrent glioblastoma, there were no options except the one that had never been tried before.
Did they tell you that it had never been tried in a human being before?
They did. But at the same time, I had nothing to lose, honestly.
I wonder what your mother said.
She looked at Dr. Desjardins and she said, you want to do what with my daughter? You want to do what? And I'm like, let's do it. Come on, let's go.
I have the sense that this scared you a lot more than you've let on.
Mm-hmm. It did. And I knew how scared my family was, and I didn't want them to see me scared.
But of course you were.
Mm-hmm.
In point of fact, we didn't know what the polio was going to do. We thought the polio virus might help her. We had no idea what it would do in the long haul. It was a crapshoot. It's roll the dice and hope that you're going to get an answer that is coming up sevens and not coming up snake eyes.
But in the months that followed, it looked like a bad bet.
So we treated her in May. Then in July, the tumor looked bigger, looked really inflamed. I got really concerned, got really worried.
You thought this wasn't working?
I thought it wasn't working.
Dr. Desjardins wanted to go back to traditional treatment, maybe another surgery, but Stephanie decided, against her advice, to wait. By October, 5 months after her infusion, an MRI showed that the tumor hadn't been growing at all. It turned out it only looked worse because it was inflamed. Stephanie's immune system had awakened to the cancer and gone to war.
Why didn't the immune system react to the cancer to begin with?
So cancers, all human cancers, they develop a shield, a shroud of protective measures that make them invisible to the immune system. And this is precisely what we try to reverse with our virus. So by infecting the tumor, we are actually removing this protective shield and enabling the immune system to come in and attack.
So essentially what's happening here inside the tumor is you have a polio infection.
Yes.
And that sets off an alarm.
Yes.
For the immune system.
Yes.
The immune system says, there's a polio infection, we better go kill it.
Exactly.
And it turns out it's the tumor.
Yes.
It appears the polio starts the killing, but it's the immune system that does most of the damage. Stephanie's tumor shrank for 21 months until it was gone. This is an MRI from this past August. 3 years after the infusion, something unimaginable has happened for a patient with recurrent glioblastoma.
And there's no cancer in this picture
And
at all.
we don't see any cancer, active cancer cells in the tumor at all.
She is cancer-free. The only thing that remains is this hole, which is an artifact of an early surgery.
Under traditional standard of care treatment, Stephanie should not be standing here next to us today.
Absolutely not.
Stephanie, when they showed this to you, what did you think?
I wanted to cry with excitement this time.
How surprised are you by that?
I'm surprised because you never expect on a phase 1 study in particular, which is what she is on, to have these kind of results.
You're not expecting to cure people in a phase 1 trial.
You're not even necessarily expecting to help them. You hope so, but that's not the design of a phase 1 study. It's designed to get the right dose. When you get anything on top of that, it's cake.
Quite a cake.
Quite a cake. Biggest cake we've seen in a long, long time.
Tell me what you see there.
Dr. Fritz Anderson showed us the results in another patient, himself. He's a retired cardiologist, and at age 70, he became the second person in the polio trial.
This is a fairly sizable temporal tumor, which means...
That we see right here.
On the left is his tumor before treatment. On the right, a hairline scar where it used to be. Like Stephanie, that was nearly 3 years ago.
When they said that this thing is just a small scar and we think it's possibly cured, I nearly fell off my chair. I said, that's impossible. They said, well, we don't know, but so far it looks fantastic.
Do you consider yourself cured, or do you call it remission?
I feel it as a cure, and I live my life that way.
Fritz and Stephanie met for the first time here at 60 Minutes when we interviewed them last fall.
You should do a head bump. There you go. There you go.
Was yours on your right side?
No, on the left. Which one's yours?
My right.
Wait, let's do left, right to left.
With the early success, the team raised the dose in the next few patients in hope of an even better result. But that's when the polio trial encountered its first tragedies. When we come back, we'll look at how the virus is working in Nancy Justice, who we met in the beginning, and at what they've discovered after trying polio against lung cancer, breast cancer, and many others. For nearly a year, we've been following the clinical trial at Duke University where the polio virus is being used to kill a vicious brain cancer called glioblastoma. The goal of the experiment was to discover the right dose of the virus. The first 2 patients saw their tumors melt away, so with that remarkable result at small doses, the researchers increased the potency of the virus in the next patients. That's how they made a tragic but vital discovery about the power of immunotherapy in killing cancer.
Maybe you just close one eye.
It's been 3 years since Stephanie Lipscomb became the first patient to see her recurrent glioblastoma wiped out by polio.
Problem with memory? No. Vision? No.
She gets a checkup at Duke every 4 months.
Hey, how are you? Good.
And she's become a celebrity to the new patients starting the polio trial. 60-year-old Donna Clegg, a social worker from Idaho, will be patient number 14.
We're going to do it?
Yes. High five.
Thank you.
This was Donna Clegg before cancer, and this is how we found her last June, puffy from the steroids they'd used to limit the swelling in her brain. Like others in the trial, she'd had surgery, chemo, and radiation, but the glioblastoma came back, and the polio virus was her last chance.
I want to be able to live. So that's kind of how I feel, that this is going to be my opportunity to have a full life.
Donna's polio infusion was 3 times more potent than the one that worked for Stephanie. And that's the whole idea behind this phase 1 trial, to increase the dose in succeeding patients step by step in search of the best result. Dr. Henry Friedman is Deputy Director of Duke's Brain Tumor Center.
We believe in the philosophy we've learned in chemotherapy that more is better. So if we were getting a good response at dose level 1 or dose level 2, then go to dose level 3, 4, 5.
In Donna Clegg, doctors saw the expected inflammation as her immune system attacked the tumor. But the higher dose caused an immune response that was much too powerful. The inflammation put so much pressure on her brain she became partially paralyzed. Back home in Idaho, she decided it was all too much and dropped out of the polio trial.
I thought this was the miracle.
Her husband recorded this in a nursing home.
When you're told you either take this chance or die, what would you do?
If you had to do over again, what would you do?
I may not have done it.
Donna Clegg died 3 weeks ago. Because she left the trial, doctors at Duke can only theorize that it was a combination of the advanced state of her disease and the ferocious immune response that ended her life.
Donna Clegg suffered quite a lot, and I wonder how that weighs on your mind.
Every patient who has an outcome that is not positive weighs on my mind. I think that when you're doing a phase 1 study, you know that these things can happen, and I don't think that we helped her quality of life. We've learned something, and I don't know that the family will take heart in the fact they're part of a legacy of passing the torch to more patients that follow. I hope that that means something to them. but she is a patient who really did not derive benefit and yet taught us something important.
You discovered that putting in too much poliovirus created too large an immune response.
Absolutely.
And that was the turning point in the daring polio trial. What was learned from Donna Clegg's death may give life to Nancy Justice. Neuro-oncologist Dr. Annick Desjardins cut the potency of Nancy's infusion by 85%. It was a lower dose than they had ever intended to use in the study. Even so, Dr. Desjardins expected a big immune response.
In the next 4 to 6 months, we should see the inflammation, so the immune system waking up, starting to kill the tumor.
You will expect to see her MRI look worse in the
Yes,
early days?
Absolutely.
Before it gets better?
Absolutely.
It certainly did. After she returned to Georgia, Nancy's symptoms started to resemble Donna Clegg's. She had trouble with words. Her right side was weak. Her husband, Greg, took her back to Duke for an emergency MRI. This was Nancy's tumor before the polio infusion. 3 months later, the site had doubled in size. The swelling had pushed one hemisphere of her brain into the other.
Avastin, 500 milligrams.
Dr. Desjardins ordered a small dose of a cancer drug called Avastin, not to treat the tumor, but to reduce the swelling. Nancy's symptoms improved right away. And 2 weeks ago, Nancy had a new MRI. It was 4.5 months since her polio infusion, and we joined her husband and sons to see the new image for the first time.
And you haven't had a chance to see it yet, so show us, doctor, what you have.
So glioblastoma is a tumor that left untreated, you expect the tumor to double in size every 2-3 weeks. So the fact that we don't see the tumor growing back, we don't see the swelling coming back, we don't see Nancy getting worse, all of that is very positive. It's a sign that the poliovirus is doing its job.
On the left is the inflammation that we saw earlier. On the right is the new MRI. Her tumor has a gaping hole. It's being wrecked from the inside out.
So where does this go from here?
So now we keep following her and hopefully it keeps shrinking and it keeps collapsing. And that's what we have seen with Fritz and Stephanie, that it continued shrinking for years.
Nancy, when you look at this, what do you think?
Oh, it's amazing. Oh my gosh. I mean, thank you, Lord. And these doctors, thank you, doctors, you know, and to just see this, you know, that's life. I mean, it's hard to not just start crying.
So far, there have been 22 patients in the polio trial. 11 died. Most of them had the higher dose, but even so, they lived months longer than expected. The other 11 continue to improve. 4 are past 6 months, which Duke calls remission.
We clearly are producing a very, very significant benefit. We've got an increase in median survival of over 6 months, which is huge in glioblastoma.
6 months doesn't sound like very
much.
much.
It doesn't sound like much, but that's just the midpoint. So we've got patients that are out as far as 33, 34 months. That is just unheard of in this disease.
Dr. Daryl Bigner is the head of the study and of Duke's Brain Tumor Center. He's been fighting brain cancer 50 years, and he told us he has never seen results like those in patients Fritz Anderson and Stephanie Lipscomb.
Based on what you have seen, is it fair to say that Stephanie and Fritz are in remission?
Oh, absolutely. That's probably a very good term to use. They're in remission, and I think they would tell you that they consider themselves normal again.
Cured?
You know, I'm very reluctant to use the cure word, the C word as we call it, because we don't know how long it takes to say that a glioblastoma has been cured. But I am beginning to think about it.
Close your eyes for me. What side am I touching you?
My left.
But what they've achieved in this rare form of cancer may be just the beginning. Molecular biologist Matthias Grohmeyer, the creator of the virus, is pressing ahead.
You have been testing this therapy against a number of other cancers just in a laboratory dish.
Yes.
What have you been able to kill so far?
So we have done this for lung cancers, breast cancers, colorectal cancers, prostate cancers, pancreatic cancers, liver cancers, renal cancers. We probably see this in just about any type of cancer you can imagine.
The man who's overseeing the polio trial for the FDA is Dr. Peter Marks, a deputy director responsible for hundreds of other experimental treatments for cancer.
You have to wonder if it's too good to be true. Some of the results in these early trials appear nearly miraculous.
We hope they really are miraculous, but we do have to be cautious because sometimes people just get lucky. And the first patients they treat with the therapy respond very well, but subsequently additional patients don't.
Help me put immunotherapy in perspective here. How big an advance is this in terms of viruses to treat cancer?
So the field of immunotherapy is tremendously exciting. It's been a paradigm shift in how we go about treating cancer because there are real products out there that are immunotherapies that are actually helping people to live longer.
So we all know about surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation, but now this is a fourth weapon.
Yes.
Already, 10 drugs that trigger the immune system have been approved, and they are significantly extending the lives of patients with cancers including lung cancer and melanoma. According to the rules of the FDA, Dr. Marks could not speak to us specifically about the polio trial, but in about a year, the FDA is expected to make a decision about whether to grant Duke what's called breakthrough status, which would make the polio treatment available to many more patients much sooner.
Glioblastoma kills 12,000 Americans a year. Fritz Anderson expected to be one of them. Before he became the second patient in the Duke trial, he wrote his own obituary. He'll have to update it. 3 years later, he's cancer-free.
Stephanie Lipscomb.
Stephanie Lipscomb wasn't supposed to see her 22nd birthday.
How are you doing?
3 years later, she's graduated from nursing school.
Do you think being a cancer survivor is going to make you a better nurse?
Oh yeah, it already has. Just because I've been a scared patient, and so I know I loved it when nurses held my hand. So I like to be there and be there emotionally for them too.
And as Nancy Justice's tumor continues to shrink, it's now leaving room for her imagination to grow.
Nancy, months ago when I met you for the first time, they were dripping the polio virus into your tumor. And you told me about some of the things that you were determined to see in the lives of these boys.
Exactly.
And I wonder if you're at a place now where you can start making plans.
Oh, definitely. I mean, that's been what's kept me going. I will see them graduate college. I will see them get married, and I will have grandchildren. In that order.
A bold experiment to kill a vicious cancer has won breakthrough status from the Food and Drug Administration. Early tests at Duke University have been so successful, the FDA will fast-track this treatment to hundreds of patients while it's still being evaluated for final approval. The therapy is audacious. It uses the polio virus to attack a virulent brain cancer called glioblastoma, which is a death sentence of astonishing speed that leaves patients with only months to live. For 2 years, we've been following volunteers in the Duke clinical trial. We have witnessed nearly miraculous recoveries and unexpected defeats on a journey of discovery beyond the known frontiers of science. Nancy Justice had been sentenced to a bleak prognosis when we met her in October 2014. At age 58, she had recurrent glioblastoma. It had come back after surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy. Typically, she could expect to live 7 months. The polio virus, which mankind had fought to eradicate from the earth, was the last chance she had in the world.
You might feel just a tiny tug there.
A half teaspoon of polio flowed through a catheter inserted through Nancy's skull directly into her tumor.
Okay.
Ready to go?
Are you ready to
I'm
go?
ready.
Let's
Bring it
go.
on.
We're starting. 9:21.
If you feel anything, you let us know.
I will, definitely.
Her husband, Greg, constantly inflated a buoyant optimism to save him from the weight of the unknown.
Okay.
Her glioblastoma was diagnosed in the 21st year of Nancy and Greg's marriage, just as the Georgia couple could make out the finish line for Zach and Luke at college. Her tumor can double in size every 2 weeks.
The tumor was aggressive, so
Yes.
you wanted an aggressive treatment.
Yes, yes.
You're a medical explorer. Does it feel that way to you?
I'm taking it one day at a time. It sounds very lofty to say medical explorer, but you know, throughout all of this, if this gives other people hope, I'm all for it.
Greg, you mentioned that Nancy was there for every important event in the boys' lives,
Right.
but there are a lot of important events to come.
Exactly.
What do you hope to see?
So I am going to see those boys walk across the stage at their college graduation. I am going to see them get married, and I am going to see grandkids, preferably in that order. And I know it's like such a mom bucket list, but I'll love every minute of it.
The number of calls are increasing again.
This is Duke's polio team. Dr. Daryl Bigner, director of the Tisch Brain Tumor Center, molecular biologist Matthias Gromeyer, and neuro-oncologist Dr. Henry Friedman and Dr. Annick Desjardins. As is typical, the university has licensed this technology to a new company to attract research dollars to the therapy, and all the members of the team are investors.
Good to see that this is going well.
Dr. Friedman screens more than 1,000 glioblastoma patients a year who would like to be treated at Duke. He helps decide who meets the criteria for the polio trial.
I wonder, of all the trials and all of the theories and all of the treatments that you have hoped for all of these years, how does this stack up?
This, to me, is the most promising therapy I've seen in my career, period.
The virus is the creation of, the obsession of, Dr. Gromeyer, who has been laboring over this for more than 25 years, the last 15 at Duke.
When you went to your colleagues and said, I've got it, we'll use the polio virus to kill cancer, what did they say?
Well, I got a range of responses from crazy to you're lying to all kinds of things. Most people thought it just was too dangerous.
I thought he was nuts. I mean, I really thought that what he's using is a weapon that produces paralysis.
Other researchers are experimenting with cancer treatments using viruses including HIV, smallpox, and measles.
But polio was Dr. Gromeyer's choice because, as luck would have it, it seeks out and attaches to a receptor that is found on the surface of the cells that make up nearly every kind of solid tumor. It's almost as if polio had evolved for the purpose.
Here is the genetic material.
Gromeyer re-engineered the virus, removing a key genetic sequence. The virus can't survive this way, so he repaired the damage with a harmless bit of cold virus. This new modified polio virus can't cause paralysis or death because it can't reproduce in normal cells. But in cancer cells, it does. And in the process of replicating, it releases toxins that poison the cell. At least, that's what they'd observed in the laboratory. Eventually, they had to try it in a human being. It's a hell of a thing to be told that you have months to live when you're 20 years old. In 2011, Stephanie Lipscomb was a nursing student with headaches. A doctor told her she had this glioblastoma tumor the size of a tennis ball.
I looked at the nurse that was sitting there holding my hand, and I said, I don't understand, like, what did he just say? It's kind of hard for me to process.
You had 98% of the tumor removed.
Exactly.
As much radiation as you can have in a lifetime, and chemotherapy.
Exactly.
And then in 2012, what did the doctors tell you?
Your cancer's back.
With recurrent glioblastoma, there were no options except the one
that had never been tried.
Did they tell you that it had never been tried in a human being before?
They did. But at the same time, I had nothing to lose, honestly.
Her polio treatment began in 2012, and from the very beginning, it looked like a bad bet.
So we treated her in May. Then in July, the tumor looked bigger, looked really inflamed. I got really concerned, got really worried.
You thought this wasn't working?
I thought it wasn't working.
Neuro-oncologist Annick Desjardins wanted to abandon the polio experiment and return to traditional treatment, but Stephanie said no. 5 months after her infusion, an MRI showed the tumor only looked worse because of inflammation caused by Stephanie's immune system, which had awakened to the cancer for the first time and gone to war. Why didn't the immune system react to the cancer to begin with?
So cancers, all human cancers, they develop a shield or shroud of protective measures that make them invisible to the immune system. And this is precisely what we try to reverse with our virus. So by infecting the tumor, we are actually removing this protective shield and enabling the immune system to come in and attack.
So essentially what's happening here inside the tumor is you have a polio infection.
Yes.
And that sets off an alarm.
Yes.
For the immune system.
Yes.
The immune system says, there's a polio infection, we better go kill it.
Exactly.
And it turns out it's the tumor.
Yes.
It appears the polio starts the killing, but the immune system does most of the damage. Stephanie's tumor shrank for 21 months until it was gone. 3 years after the infusion, something unimaginable had happened. This is from an MRI in August 2014. And there's no cancer in this picture at all.
We don't see any cancer, active cancer cells.
She is cancer-free. All that remains is this hole from an early surgery.
How surprised are you by that?
I'm surprised because you never expect on a phase 1 study in particular to have these kind of results.
You're not expecting to cure people in a phase 1 trial.
You're not even necessarily expecting to help them. You hope so, but that's not the design of a phase 1 study. It's designed to get the right dose. When you get anything on top of that, it's cake.
Quite a cake.
Quite a cake. Biggest cake we've seen in a long, long time.
Dr. Fritz Anderson showed us the results in another patient, himself. He's a retired cardiologist, and at age 70, he became the second person in the polio trial.
This is a fairly sizable temporal tumor, which means...
That we see right here. On the left is his tumor before treatment. On the right, a hairline scar where it used to be. That was nearly 3 years ago.
Do you consider yourself cured, or do you call it remission?
I feel it as a cure, and I live my life that way.
After the early successes, the next patients would receive a higher dose. That's the whole idea behind a phase 1 trial, to increase the dose in succeeding patients step by step in search of the highest dose that is still safe.
We believe in the philosophy we've learned in chemotherapy that more is better. So if we were getting a good response at dose level 1 or dose level 2, then go to dose level 3, 4, 5.
60-year-old Donna Clegg was a social worker from Idaho. We met her in 2014, puffy from the steroids used to reduce the swelling in her brain.
I want to be able to live. So that's kind of how I feel that this is going to be my opportunity to have a full life.
Donna's polio infusion was 3 times more potent than the one that had worked for Stephanie. But in her case, this higher dose set off an immune response that was much too powerful. Donna battled the inflammation for 9 months before she died in March 2015.
Donna Clegg suffered quite a lot, and I wonder how that weighs on your mind.
Every patient who has an outcome that is not positive weighs on my mind. I think that when you're doing a phase 1 study, you know that these things can happen, but she is a patient who really did not derive benefit, and yet taught us something important.
You discovered that putting in too much poliovirus created too large an immune response.
Absolutely.
After that hard lesson, doctors cut the potency of Nancy Justice's dose by 85%. It was less than they had ever expected to use. They called this new dose dose -1. But even so, 4.5 months after her infusion in March 2015, inflammation had caused the mass in Nancy's brain to double in size. But to Dr. Desjardins, the tumor looked weaker.
And in this image, it's shot through full of holes.
It's shot through full of holes, and let me show you the next picture, and you'll see it's even more and more holes.
So where does this go from here?
So now we keep following her, and hopefully it keeps shrinking, and it keeps collapsing. And that's what we have seen with Fritz and Stephanie, that it continued shrinking for years.
Nancy, when you look at this, what do you think?
Oh, it's amazing. Oh my gosh. I mean, thank you, Lord. And these doctors, thank you, doctors. You know, and to just see this, you know, that's life.
Nancy Justice faces a hard road ahead, but along the way, new discoveries will take the researchers in a direction they never imagined. "38 patients have volunteered for Duke University's experiment to use the polio virus to kill glioblastoma, the most efficient, relentless cancer of the brain. The FDA's decision to grant Duke breakthrough status means the second phase of the trial will be expanded to about 40 institutions with hundreds of patients. If that goes well, Duke will be allowed to skip the third phase of the trial and make polio therapy for glioblastoma available to all. The route to this achievement was not a straight line. The first volunteers saw their tumors disappear, but later, patients suffered crippling setbacks. There was a way forward, but researchers found themselves on a path they had not imagined. Their guide through the mystery was a patient named Brendan Steele.
Riley and Connor from Mom and Dad.
On Christmas Eve, 2009, Brendan Steele could not know how precious the gift of life would be. At 37, he was an IT manager in Montana, a husband and father of 3. But then, doctors found glioblastoma and gave him 11 months to say goodbye. When surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy failed, Brendan volunteered for Duke's polio trial. And in 2013, he received the 6-hour polio virus infusion. But in removing the catheter, a blood vessel was severed. His wife, Kathy, was by his side.
Brennan said it's weird, and he goes to hold his head, and weird just kind of drained out, like that was the end of his speech.
You understood how bad off you were?
No.
No.
No, because I don't remember.
Emergency surgery stopped the bleeding, but the trauma left Brendan barely able to walk or talk. 7 months later, a biopsy revealed that his tumor was growing. Doctors gave Brendan chemotherapy. It had failed him before, but it might give him just a few more weeks. Neuro-oncologist Annick Desjardins did not imagine what happened next.
We gave him 1 dose of chemotherapy, and the lesion just melted, went away rapidly, which we don't see that happen normally.
2 months after that single dose of chemo, the tumor, the white mass on the right, started to break up. Brendan continued the chemotherapy, and in 8 months, it was gone.
And what do the doctors tell you about your cancer today?
No cancer. No cancer.
Recurrent glioblastoma. And now they tell you they cannot find it in your brain.
Yep.
Brendan Steele has lived 35 months since his polio infusion. He's been cancer-free for 19. Dr. Henry Friedman, deputy director of Duke's Cancer Center, has a theory about why the chemo worked this time when it never had before.
Shockingly, chemotherapy in patients who have previously failed it, once they've had the poliovirus therapy, now seem to have a new, enhanced, almost extraordinary response to the chemotherapy, as if the poliovirus has set up the tumor to be more responsive to chemotherapy.
That was a surprise?
That was a surprise. And for us to see this, it was a stunning observation that is actually the platform for a future study that will involve chemotherapy and the poliovirus.
The discovery changed their approach to Nancy Justice. You'll remember when we last saw Nancy in March 2015, Dr. Desjardins saw signs her tumor was breaking up. But in the months that followed, the inflammation kept growing. As Nancy's brain compressed, she was losing the connections to her arm, her legs, and her relationship to the very space around her.
And then touch your nose here. To your nose. Yeah, to your nose.
Okay.
Whatever part of the brain involves the will to fight appeared to be unaffected. Now, would a single dose of chemotherapy have the same miraculous result as it did for Brendan Steele? Dr. Desjardins reached for their new discovery, and within 2 months, the mass was shrinking.
See how the folds of the brain are back when they were all squeezed shut?
Oh, wow.
The ventricle is reopening.
Look at that. Hallelujah. Now that's what we're looking for, honey.
How did you feel at that time?
Oh, loved it. I mean, that's what we'd been working for, praying for.
Tumors getting smaller and smaller.
Somebody had taken a eraser to it.
As the inflammation retreated, there was new space for hope.
Up, 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 up. Elbow straight, elbow straight. Elbow.
Look at the speed, honey.
Nancy found strength.
Yes.
And buoyed always by her husband Greg, she walked up to a mile a day. Nancy's life was covering a distance of time denied to glioblastoma patients. But last February, 15 months after her infusion of polio, her run met another hurdle.
Just a little more inflammation.
The day her journey began, she told us she would see her sons graduate, be married, and have children. In that order, she joked. Now, determination was nuanced with gratitude for what she'd had already.
Nancy, when we met you the first time, I asked you about your mom bucket list. How are those weddings and grandkids looking to you now?
Okay, so right now, I'm thinking it's just the simple things right now that I enjoy.
7 weeks after that interview, in late March, Nancy was rushed back to Duke. The light that never dimmed was in her eyes, but her words were gone. This is what she was fighting. The inflammation engulfed half her brain.
I just think we need to know what we're dealing with so we can move.
Neurosurgeon Alan Friedman needed to find out if the mass was a buildup of dead cells from the immune response or active cancer. He slipped a needle into her brain to extract a bit of tissue.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See you there in a second.
The tissue was rushed to the pathology lab where a microscope discovered dead cells where the polio was working, but also regrowth of the tumor. Glioblastoma had found a way back.
Hey, Nancy. How are you doing?
17 months after we first met Nancy, doctors Alan Friedman and Anique Desjardins explained to Greg that Nancy's tumor had now infiltrated parts of her brain responsible for breathing and cognition.
She's getting worse, and maybe it's the time where we cannot do anything anymore to help her, and we need to let her go.
And we love you, you know that, right?
We wondered whether Greg would do it all again.
Definitely, we would do it. Nancy would have been gone long ago. And I think it's given us some good time, and we appreciate that.
On April 6th, Nancy Justice, medical explorer, passed away at the age of 60. She'd had 9 more months than she could have expected.
What did Nancy teach you?
From the treatment standpoint, what she taught us is 2 different things. So clearly, the combination of the poliovirus with the chemotherapy had at first an amazing response. We need to understand that. The next thing is, at some point, though, it stopped working. And why did that happen?
What the Duke team has learned is that inflammation is an unavoidable consequence of the immune system's attack in most patients, and that managing it with drugs will likely be a key to survival.
So far, there have been 21 patients at this lowest dose, -1.
Yes.
8 of them have died.
Yes.
Put that in perspective for me.
All the ones who haven't died on a phase 1 trial is simply remarkable. To see positive results in terms of controlling a tumor or shrinking a tumor in patients with recurrent disease on a phase 1 trial is remarkable. It's not your goal, it's not your expectation, but it certainly is something that when you see it, you say, this is really terrific, this is special.
Apparently, the FDA saw something special too. Breakthrough status was granted after data showed that patients who'd been living an average of 10 months were living an average of 15 months, and 3 patients showed no sign of cancer at all after 3 years. Dr. Daryl Bigner, who runs Duke's Brain Tumor Center, has fought glioblastoma for 50 years. When you talk of median survival being extended from 10 months to 15 months, for some of these patients, it's 15 months and counting.
Yes.
They're still living.
Yes. Yes, and we still have got significant periods of high quality survival, and that is a huge difference. And then we have patients like Stephanie, Fritz, and Brandon that are leading virtually normal lives. I mean, they probably go many days without even thinking about having had a glioblastoma, which is just amazing.
You were in medical school thinking about one day being able to beat glioblastoma, and now you are standing on this doorstep. What does that mean to you personally?
It's an enormous feeling, and I have to be very careful. I never want to give anyone false hope, but I see all of the science coming together now, and I know it's going to happen. I've never felt that way until now.
And in an amazing new development, this science may be coming together for an entire range of cancers. In the laboratory, Duke has used polio to kill cancer cells of the skin, pancreas, stomach, lung, colon, and prostate. Immunologist Dr. Smita Nair showed us what polio did to breast cancer in mice.
This is breast cancer tissue, and what we find is, if you look at this, is here is a tumor that got injected with poliovirus. Here's a tumor that got injected with just saline. And the difference in the tumor size is extremely visible here.
Night and day.
We kept seeing this. So we went back and asked the question, what is happening in the tumors? And we teased these tumors apart. And what we found were a lot of T cells in the tumor.
Immune system cells.
Immune system cells.
Dr. Nair has filmed immune system T cells, shown here in color, breaking apart a tumor cell. What you see took a little over 1 hour. This leads Dr. Nair and others to a fascinating possibility. Once immune cells are programmed to recognize a cancer, will they remember and attack that cancer everywhere in the body for a lifetime?
If you get a tumor again, these are memory T cells. They will remember that, and they can eliminate a recurrent or a metastatic tumor.
How long does it take typically to get from this mouse stage into a human trial?
I would say anything between 3 to 5 years. It takes some time.
Well, go back to work and stop talking to me.
That's what I will do. That's what I think I should do.
Remember 2 months ago you couldn't lift that heel.
There is much left to learn. Why do some patients suffer and die while others given months to live appear to have a complete recovery? 3 years after his polio treatment, Brendan Steele remains cancer-free, and he's determined to overcome the damage from his surgery, a conviction that he keeps within arm's length. It's not whether you get knocked down, it's whether you get up. Great words to live by.
Yeah. I remind myself every day, get up, get up.
4 years after his polio therapy, 73-year-old Fritz Anderson is traveling the world with his wife.
I'm alive because of it. If I hadn't received it, I don't think I would be here today.
And Stephanie Lipscomb, patient number 1 in the clinical trial 4 years ago, has now become a nurse.
Do you remember me coming in this morning? I know you're
Yes, I
sleepy.
did. Yes.
You told us before that being a cancer patient would probably make you a better nurse. And I wonder, has it?
Oh yes. To talk to my patients and tell them, look, I've been in the hospital. I've been sick like this. I can just see the hope in their eyes.
Where do you want to take your nursing career?
Pediatric oncology.
Kids with cancer.
Yes, sir. Because I was 20 when I was diagnosed. I wasn't really completely an adult, and I absolutely love kids. With this unique experience of surviving stage 4 cancer in my brain, if I don't do this, then it's kind of like a waste of being cancer-free.
You think you survived for a reason.
Oh yes, most definitely.
It's often said that we are our memories, that web of experiences, relationships, thoughts, and feelings that make us who we are. We don't remember it all, of course. That would be impossible. Or would it? There's been a discovery in the field of memory recently, so new you won't find it in any textbook, so hard to fathom, there are some who remain unconvinced. For the moment, the scientists studying it are simply calling it Superior Autobiographical Memory. And unless you happen to know one of the handful of people discovered so far who have it, get ready to be amazed. Louise Owen is 37 years old and a professional violinist living in New York City. But she has another gift too, one that is far more rare. Let me give you a date. Let's say January 2nd, 1990.
Right now I'm remembering the jogging class that I started that morning.
And you're actually back there.
I can feel it. I can remember the coach saying, keep going.
That was more than 20 years ago when she was 16, a date I picked completely at random, as I did this one. February 18th, 1988.
1988. Oh.
You're laughing.
I'm laughing. It was a Thursday. I had a big conversation with a friend of mine, and that's all I'm going to say.
Louise says she can remember every day of her life since the age of 11. Try to talk us through, can you do that? How it works out of the air. April 21st, 1991.
1991, okay, April 21st. So in the moment between April 21st and 1991, I have scrolled through 25 April 21sts thinking, which one is it going to be? Which one is it going to be? Okay, 1991, which was a Sunday, and I was in Los Angeles, and I had a concert with the American Youth Symphony.
You went to the most important thing
right,
that happened that day.
That was the most, I mean, you probably don't want to hear about, sort of the day. Oh, I got up in the morning, and I got dressed.
You remember that?
Yeah.
You remember what you had for lunch?
Not what I had for lunch that day, but I do remember what I had for dinner the night before.
And effortless. It just pops in.
I mean, for me, it's almost as automatic as if you say, what is your name and where do you live?
But how do we know that what she says she remembers really happened? Enter James McGaugh, a professor of neurobiology at the University of California, Irvine, and a renowned expert on memory. Dr. McGaugh is the first to discover and study superior autobiographical memory, and he is quizzing Louise, his 5th subject, to find out. An eye condition requires him to wear a clouded lens.
Let's move back in time now to 1990. It rained on several days in January and February. Can you name the dates on which it rained?
Believe it or not, she could.
Let's see. It was slightly rainy and cloudy on January 14th, 15th. It was very hot the weekend of the 27th, 28th. No rain.
We checked the official weather records.
It rained very hard on Sunday, February 4th.
And she was right. McGaugh says this type of memory is completely new to science, so he and his colleagues have had to devise their own tests, like this one on public events.
October 19th, 1987.
It was a Monday. That was the day of the big stock market crash, and the cellist Jacqueline Dupre died that day.
The Berlin Wall falls on what day?
November 9th, 1989, which was a Thursday.
Christopher Reeve's accident occurred on what day?
It was Saturday, May 27th, 1995.
And when were the Oscars held in 1999?
In 1999, Sunday, March 21st.
Yes, perfect.
I went to a fabulous Oscar party that day.
Because these people remember things that you and I couldn't possibly remember.
And they're not memorizing, there's no trick.
They can do with their memories what you and I can do about yesterday.
And they can do it every day.
And they can do it every day. And when I ask what goes on in your brain, what goes on in your mind, they give the very unsatisfying response, I just see it. It's just there.
The first person ever identified with this ability is Jill Price, who says she feels haunted by the never-ending stream of memories and hasn't wanted to meet any of the others.
40 tomorrow with a chance of snow or rain.
Next was Brad Williams, a radio news anchor and reporter from La Crosse, Wisconsin, who isn't bothered by his memory. He says it comes in handy at work and playing trivia games.
I would get 6,000, 7,000 points. Everybody else would get 1,000 points.
Third was Rick Barron from Cleveland. Do you remember every movie you've ever seen?
Sure.
And you remember when lots of television shows started?
Anything. Movie.
60 Minutes?
Tuesday, September 24th, 68. The first Sunday show was September 19th, 71.
August 1st, 1974.
Thursday.
Why do you know that?
Well, that's my most memorable August 1st.
And Bob Petrella,
I moved to LA that year.
a TV producer and writer who serves as the collective memory and sometimes the evening entertainment for his friends.
1996, April 27th, which was a Saturday.
It was a Tuesday.
No, April 27th, 96.
Chart? No, oh, I'm in 93.
See?
It was a Saturday.
Everybody
Right.
else can't remember anything as getting older.
I have an almanac and I'm wrong.
Not wrong.
I must confess that when I first heard about this research, what surprised me was not that this condition existed, but that it was considered so rare. That's because it sounded like a description of a friend of mine, the actress Mary Lou Henner, the star of the hit TV show Taxi. She lives with her husband and 2 sons from a prior marriage in Los Angeles.
Hey, Mom, what day was Valentine's Day in 79?
In 1979, it was a Wednesday.
And you're right.
You know, you've lived with me your entire
Yeah, but
life.
you've never explained how you do that.
I don't do it. I just see it.
You and I have known each other
25 years. I can rattle off almost every single time I've seen you. Do you remember when we went to Oriole, the restaurant? That was 93.
Oh my gosh.
That was
Oh
June
my-
1st, the Tuesday.
And what did we eat?
I had the salmon because
She even remembers what day she first wore many of the shoes in her large and well-organized closet.
Like these shoes, I wore them the first time I wore them October 18th, 2007. These I wore on April the 21st of this year, so that was a Tuesday. These shoes I got a long time ago.
It sure seemed like Superior Autobiographical Memory to me.
1982. I got them on April the 9th, so that was a Friday of 1982.
We put Mary Lou in touch with Dr. McGaw.
Hi, so nice to meet you.
I'm Jim.
To have her memory officially put to the test. There was a session in his office.
You know when John Lennon was killed?
Yes, that was December 8th, 1980, and that was a Monday.
A round of standard memory tests.
Go ahead and
Go
put
ahead
them
and
in
do
the
it.
order that they were presented to you.
The public events quiz.
Delta Airline Flight 191 crashes near Dallas, Texas.
Oh, I know exactly when that happened because all of a sudden I was at it was August the 2nd of 1985. It was a Friday.
After 7 hours of grilling,
October 1st, 8th, 15th, 22nd.
McGaw and his collaborator, neuroscientist Larry Cahill, officially anointed Mary Lou Henner Superior Autobiographical Memory Subject number 6.
Extremely impressive.
You really do remember your whole life.
It's like putting in a DVD and it cues up to a certain place. I'm there again. So I'm looking out from my eyes and seeing things visually as I would have that day.
Do you remember all your old boyfriend's birthdays? I'll bet you do.
Not only that, the date of the first time, it's like, no, I remember in order.
Let's have another warm Miami welcome for Mary Lou Henner.
We searched for footage of long-ago events in Mary Lou's life to try and stump her. October 26th, 1976.
Okay, October 26th,
1976.
was a Tuesday. Oh, I went to shoot a Ring Around the Collar commercial in Venice, Italy, and you saw a 2.5-second mood shot of Venice, and then a gondolier singing, "Of love I sing, tra-la-la-la, for you got ring around the collar." And I went, my powder didn't work.
Of love I sing, la-la-la-la.
More than 30 years later,
Around the collar.
My powder didn't work.
dead on.
Boy, you guys really have drawn up the dregs.
What do you see as the potential in terms of science?
It could be a new chapter. We think we knew a lot, and all of a sudden these people come and display a kind of memory we've never seen before, and we have to say, woo, what is that about? And so we're going to take a look and see if we can figure that out. And it could be very important.
I'm so excited to meet you guys. One thing Dr. McGaugh had not yet done is bring these memory wizards together. So we did. And he kicked off a questioning session unlike any other.
A 7.1 earthquake hit the San Francisco-Oakland area on
October 17th, 1989.
Tuesday.
I remember we were watching the game of the World Series. It was like, oh my gosh.
Are you guys feeling a little competitive with each other?
No.
Well, I want to make sure that I'm not the dunce here.
No, I know.
I got to keep up.
When they tell you they know, are they always correct?
I would say over 99% of the time, if not 100% of the time. If they tell you something and you can check it, they're right. I've almost given up looking now because, okay, they're right.
People go, okay, what's the trick?
Yeah,
Or what's
exactly,
that's what you get a lot.
They seem to relish the chance finally to compare notes.
Do you guys ever get ticked at someone? It's something you consider monumental, and for them it's monumental, and then you bring it up and they go, well, I don't remember that. It's like, how can you forget that?
You know what I love when people get so flattered, like they go, wow, I must have really made an impression on you. And I go, no.
Does it ever freak anybody out?
People misunderstand it a lot of times. They think it's photographic. They think it's autistic. You know, they call you Rain Man. Right. And I'll just go along with it. I'll say, yeah, definitely Friday, you know, stuff like that.
It was a question we had. Are they autistic? Are they anything like savants?
Well, I guess the answer is yes and no. They're not people who have an extraordinary ability but can't tie their shoe. And that's part of what I think makes this at least so interesting for me, is that you have this really remarkable ability in a person who is otherwise pretty darn normal.
But what exactly does normal mean when you remember every day of your life? When everything good and everything bad that's ever happened to you is right there, instantly accessible. When you look back at painful memories, is it just as raw?
Sometimes it'll be as though it happened yesterday. Sometimes it's as though it happened last week.
Just the mention of a sad day, like the one in 1986, when Louise learned she'd have to change schools, and she relives it emotionally.
I felt like my whole world was collapsing. And you say that, and it's like all of a sudden, I feel like this really heartbroken little 13-year-old all over again.
You feel it?
I do feel it.
Vivid.
Yeah.
Awful.
Yeah.
Is your heart?
I mean, my heart is actually pounding right now.
telling me this. She says her memory is a gift, but there are definitely downsides.
Sometimes having this sort of extreme memory can be a very isolating sort of thing. There are times when I feel like I'm fluent in a language that nobody else speaks, or that I'm walking around and everybody else has amnesia.
Are there still skeptics in your field who know what you're up to and
Yes, science is based on skepticism. And so, yes, there are skeptics. I suppose if I had not met these people and tested them, I would be a skeptic. My answer to that is, come on over for a day, I'll let you meet a few of them. And I'd like to see how many of them walk away and say, well, it's not a big deal. No, it is a big deal, and we need to figure out what it's all about.
Come on in.
And that work is already underway. Dr. McGaugh is doing MRI scans of all the subjects, searching for clues that might be hidden in the structure of their brains.
You all right there? Yeah. Okay, here we go.
Preliminary results from the MRIs are in, and the findings are tantalizing and unexpected. We'll tell you about that and what this kind of memory has meant for their relationships when we come back. Beyond the fun of asking what happened on August 16, 1983, and knowing you'll actually get an answer, there is a lot at stake here. The discovery of people with instant access to virtually every day of their lives could recast our whole understanding of how human memory works and what's possible. And that has implications for all of us. Is it possible we all have memories of every day tucked away in our brains, but we just can't retrieve them? Could understanding these remarkable people someday help with Alzheimer's and other memory disorders? Scientists tell us the potential is enormous, but the inquiry is just beginning. The first step, look at and try to figure out what might be going on inside their brains. We watched as the first MRI images of Louise Owen's brain appeared on the screen. The hope is that somewhere in these pictures and measurements will lie the first clue that might explain what makes her memory so extraordinary.
Did you find anything good?
We'll find out.
What did you think you were going to find, and then what did you find?
Well, if you want the honest truth is that I thought, I bet we'll find nothing.
Oh.
Right. I mean, it's kind of like figuring that, if you open Einstein's brain, there's going to be some huge lobe that says genius. You don't find stuff like that.
But Dr. Cahill was wrong. No flashing genius lobes, but they did find parts of the brain that were significantly larger in people with superior autobiographical memory than in control subjects of matched age and gender.
This would be a person looking this way.
He brought along a model of a brain to show us.
There's two areas that are jumping out at us. The first is this area over here called the temporal lobe, and this area is quite a bit bigger. Now, that's intriguing because this is the chunk of brain neurobiologists think has to do with storing new memories.
So not a surprise.
Not a surprise there.
More interesting, he says, is a second region deep inside the brain called the caudate nucleus, which scientists believe is involved in what's called habit or skill learning, and also in obsessive-compulsive disorder. Can you give us an analogy of how much larger these sections are?
A lot larger, perhaps up to 7 or 8 what's called standard deviations larger than normal. To understand what that means, if a man was 7 or 8 standard deviations taller than the height of the average man, he'd be 10 feet tall. So we have some potentially whopping effects.
Giants.
Giants.
Now they need to figure out why.
We have the chicken-egg problem. Do they have these larger brain regions because they have exercised it a lot, or do they have good memories because
these are larger?
Because these are larger.
And what about the fact that the caudate nucleus is thought to be involved in obsessive-compulsive disorder? The scientists think there may just be a hint there. And Exhibit A is Mary Lou Henner's closet.
I love organization. I like my shoes a certain way, right foot going this way, left foot going that way, so you can always see the toe and the heel on every pair. And you'll see that things are very color coordinated here, but in sections. And I always hang like with like, and I have the exact same hangers because then everything slides more easily.
All of them have what we think of as OCD-like behaviors. They love to collect things. They have to have things in just the right order.
What about phobias?
This hypochondria count is like, oh, I hope I don't get this. I hope I don't get that disease.
You have a little germa?
I wash hands frequently, yeah.
So do I. In fact, I dropped my keys when I was in a hurry driving down here, and I went, all right. So I went back in and I washed them off. I ran them off. Yeah, I do that all the time if I drop them.
Can you conclude there's a connection, or we're still way too early?
Because it's showing up in one fashion or another in all of them, I'd say it's our biggest clue.
And when you think about it, they even seem to look for ways to organize their memories.
The thing that is most pleasurable is categorizing any event. Any time I went bowling in my life, any wedding.
That you lived.
Starting as a 6-year-old.
Sometimes what I do is I'll go back July 14th, as far back as I can remember. I just go July 14th, 67, that happened. And then maybe I won't remember 68, but I'll remember 69 and 70. And
or you remember around 68.
But do you all do that?
Yeah.
Louise even compares dates.
I'll scroll all the way back to 1985. I'll be like, well, which were better, March 3rds or March 4ths? A year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and go all the way back. It's sort of like mental gymnastics.
There's a certain irony to the fact that it is Dr. McGaw who is studying this phenomenon because he is known in the field of memory for discoveries these people seem to defy. His work with rats, like this one, that doesn't know there's a platform hidden below the surface of this water tank, prove the role of adrenaline in making strong memories. The rat swims around the edge, then eventually ventures out and by chance bumps into the platform. The next day, he'll find it just a little bit faster. But watch this rat that learned where the platform was yesterday, then received a shot of adrenaline immediately afterward.
Notice that it starts out not on the edge.
Ooh.
There you go.
Oh, that's impressive. Adrenaline actually made this rat's brain remember better. And McGaw says the same thing happens in people. When we experience something emotional, positive or negative, our bodies release adrenaline, searing those memories into our brains more strongly. What can you and I do right now to make sure we remember this conversation? I could kick you.
Yeah, or I could embarrass you. Most of my research is with laboratory rats. And suppose I said all of a sudden, oh, and I'm going to demonstrate it to you, and I drop about 6 rats right at your feet.
I'd remember, believe me, I'd remember.
You'd remember. I said, excuse me, don't sit on her lap. Excuse me, you're not supposed to be there. I think you'd remember that.
Now, the people that we're meeting now,
Yes.
they wouldn't need those rats. And that's what's so baffling. These people do remember the ordinary, non-emotional events the rest of us routinely forget. Lots of sports fans can remember highlights from particularly exciting games. Bob Petrella, a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, remembers every game. When was the last time the Redskins beat the Steelers?
Let's see. They played them in 2004, and the Steelers won. They played them in 2000, the Steelers
We sat there as he scanned back through 19 seasons in 19 seconds.
Oh, in 91. Yeah, they played in 91, November 17th, 1991.
This is
they
fun.
killed them.
Bravo. We tried even further back. What were the last 2 games in October of 1979?
Let's see, the 22nd, they played Denver on Monday night, and I think they won 42-7.
Yep.
And then they played, Dallas on October 28th, Sunday. It was on CBS, so you can get that game.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
We did. We got that game. And 31 years later, he was able to describe plays.
Staubach was scrambling, and Elsie Greenwood just slammed right into him. It was in the 4th quarter.
Staubach really took a shot. He was hit by Greenwood.
He even remembered specific images from the broadcast.
I remember Staubach just sitting on the bench. You could just tell he was out of it.
How about November 11th, 1990?
They didn't play. That was a bye.
You're good. That was a trick question.
No, I remember that day because I was depressed. I had broken up with this woman, and I was going out to run a couple of videos, and I was thinking about her.
There's a quote that I love. It's by the great psychologist William James. He said, if we remembered everything, we should on most occasions be as ill off as if we remembered nothing.
And that's what the field of memory has always considered a given, that a healthy dose of forgetting is crucial to our ability to think.
You abstract and generalize, in part because you forget. When you have a trip to work, and you have the same trip every day, you abstract and you generalize a typical trip to work because you don't remember every single detail of every single trip. So a little forgetting is needed to help you abstract and generalize.
Well, that's what I always thought, until I met your 5 subjects today. Do you ever get the feeling that all these memories are cluttering up your mind? But it's just too much up there, and I need to sweep this away?
It's organized. You know what I mean? It's organized, so it's called on when you need it. But it's not like they're like, oh, they're coming in all the time, and I don't feel like
it's
that.
not overwhelming.
The surprising thing is that these people don't appear to have cluttered brains. They can pull out the right information at the right time, and that's the puzzle.
It's the real puzzle.
That's the puzzle.
It kind of takes everything we've all assumed, scientists and ordinary people, and said, come on, guys, rethink it.
Yeah, got to do some rethinking, but that's fun. That's part of the fun part of science.
This is where the saliva goes.
And they're pursuing every avenue they can. DNA testing to see if there are differences in their genetic makeup. Handedness testing, since all 3 men are lefties, to see if that yields any clues.
Well, which way would you cartwheel? I mean, could you imagine going this way, or could you imagine?
I'm offering you to do cartwheels.
The inquiry is just getting started, with 6 willing subjects eager to see where it all will lead, and who knows how many more still out there.
I've always loved having this memory. I feel as an actress and as a writer, it's been indispensable. As a mother, as a wife, certainly.
Why do you say that?
Oh my gosh. No, because you can never lose an argument. No, you didn't say that. I said this, you said this.
Yeah, but maybe
It's
he
fun.
doesn't like it so
no,
much.
I know. Yeah, well,
Is
that's
that a
probably why I'm
problem?
on my 3rd. Yeah.
Which raises a real question, since Mary Lou is the only one of the 6 subjects who is married or has children. You would think that in romance,
It can be tricky.
it can be tricky.
I think so.
Breakups must be
Horrible.
horrible because you cannot not remember.
Right.
I find it intriguing that 4 out of 5 of you are not married, and as far as I'm aware, are not in a relationship. Do you all think there's a problem having this memory and having a good relationship?
I like to think it's coincidence.
You're going to remember everything?
Right.
You're going to win every argument?
Although I think it's, it's what you do with it. I mean, I try not to be defined by this.
And she says, for the most part, she succeeds. Overall, is it a good thing? Are you glad you have this?
I am.
You are?
I am. I mean, sure, there are times when it's difficult, but I feel like it makes me live my life with so much more intention and so much more joy. Like,
What do you mean more intention?
Because I know that I'm going to remember whatever happens today. It's like, all right, what can I do to make today significant? What can I do that is going to make today stand out?
As you watch these remarkable people, and as you think back on, say, my 3 children, how little I can actually remember from when they were 4, 5, 6, you start to wonder, why are we the default state? Why are we normal? And they're the unusual ones. Why didn't we evolve such that most of us are like them and we're the unusual ones who can hardly remember anything? Just makes you wonder.
At age 45, Chris Downey had pretty much constructed the life he'd always wanted. An architect with a good job at a small housing firm outside San Francisco, he was happily married with a 10-year-old son. He was an assistant Little League coach and avid cyclist. And then doctors discovered a tumor in his brain. He had surgery and the tumor was safely gone, but Downey was left completely blind. What he has done in the 10 years since losing his sight as a person and as an architect can only be described as a different kind of vision. Several mornings a week, as the sun rises over the Oakland estuary in California, an amateur rowing team works the water. It's hard to tell which one of them is blind, and Chris Downey thinks that's just fine.
It's really exciting to be in a sport where nobody looks in the direction they're going. You're faced this way in the boat, and you're going that way. So, okay, even Steven.
We were just talking about that whole exterior.
It's not exactly even Steven in this design meeting, where Downey is collaborating with sighted architects on a new hospital building.
Or under the canopy where you can have downlights.
But he hasn't let that stop him. Here you are in a profession that basically requires you to read designs and draw designs. You must have thought in your head, that is insurmountable.
No.
You never thought,
I never thought
you
that.
never thought the word
actually,
insurmountable.
Lots of people, friends that were architects, and anybody else would say, oh my God, it's the worst thing imaginable to be an architect and to lose your sight. I can't imagine anything worse. But I quickly came to realize that the creative process is an intellectual process. It's how you think. So it just needed new tools.
New tools? Downey found a printer that could emboss architectural drawings so that he could read and understand through touch.
They look like normal prints, normal drawings on the computer, but then they just come out in tactile form.
So it is like Braille, isn't it?
Right.
And he came up with a way to sketch his ideas onto the plans using a simple children's toy, malleable wax sticks that he shapes to show his modifications to others. And he says something surprising started to happen. He could no longer see buildings and spaces, but he began hearing them.
The sounds, the textures, and the sound changes because there's a canopy overhead.
You can sense that we're under a canopy?
Yes. It's all a matter of how the sound works from the tip of the cane.
I was fascinated walking through buildings that I knew sighted, but I was experiencing them in a different way. I was hearing the architecture, I was feeling the space.
It sounds as if you began almost enjoying, in a way, being the blind architect.
Sort of this excitement of, I'm a kid again. I'm relearning so much of architecture. It wasn't about what I'm missing in architecture, it was about what I had been missing in architecture.
Is that sufficiently different?
Oh, yeah.
Chris Downey's upbeat attitude doesn't mean that he didn't go through one of the most frightening experiences imaginable and struggle. He and his wife Rosa were living in this same home with their son Renzo, then 10, when Downey first noticed a problem while playing catch with Renzo. The ball kept coming in and out of sight. The cause turned out to be a tumor near his optic nerve. Surgery to remove it lasted 9.5 hours. He says his surgeon had told him there was a slight risk of total sight loss, but that he'd never had it happen.
When he first came out of surgery, he was able to see.
But then things started to go wrong. The next day, half his field of vision disappeared. And then...
The next time I woke up, it was all gone. It was just black.
Complete and total darkness. No light, you can't see
no light.
Anything.
It's dark. It's all dark.
After days of frantic testing, a surgeon told him it was permanent, irreversible, and sent in a social worker.
She said, oh, and I see from your chart you're an architect, so we can talk about career alternatives.
Career alternatives?
Yeah.
Right away.
And been told I was officially blind for 24 hours.
And she's saying you can't be an architect
anymore.
She
is saying we can talk about career alternatives. So I felt like these walls were being built up around me, just like, yeah, you're getting boxed in.
Alone that night in his room, Downey did some serious thinking about his son and about his own father, who had died from complications after surgery when Downey was 7 years old.
I could quickly appreciate the wonder, the joy of, I'm still here.
It was actually joy?
Yeah, it's like, I'm still here with my family. My son still has his dad.
You know, your eyes are tearing up. You know that.
Yeah. Sorry. It's, I always have a hard time talking through that.
He knew that how he handled this would send a strong message to Renzo.
I had been talking with him about the need to really apply himself. At the age of 10, it's that point where if you want something, you really have to work at it. And here I am, facing this great challenge.
So, motivated to set an example, he headed back to work only 1 month later.
This was the most healthy thing about Chris.
Brian Bashan is executive director of the nonprofit Lighthouse for the Blind and Visually Impaired in San Francisco, and is blind himself.
He waited a few days until the stitches were out of his skull, and 30 days after brain surgery, he was back in the office thinking, okay, there's got to be a way to figure this out, and I'm going to figure it out.
Bashan's organization, the Lighthouse, helps people new to vision loss learn how to figure things out.
Let's try the first line.
When someone becomes blind, the odds are 99% they've never met another blind person.
Is that right?
Yeah, that really is true. Blind people need those role models. How to be blind, how to hold down a job, how to live an independent life.
Specifically, how to work in the kitchen safely.
Good morning.
How to navigate public transportation. How to use screen reading software to listen to emails as quickly as the rest of us read them. Did you understand that?
Yes.
No. And most critically, how to get around in the world alone. Downey learned that at the Lighthouse. When you first crossed a big street like this on your own,
Yeah.
Is it terrifying?
That is absolutely terrifying.
I can imagine. I can totally imagine.
So I remember that day that stepping off the curb, you would have thought I was stepping into raging waters. Take a deep breath and go for it. You got to push through it.
Within a few months, he was traveling the streets on his own and getting back to normalcy with his son.
The first Father's Day came up. Rosa was like, so what do you want to do? You want to go on a picnic, go on a nice lunch? I want to play baseball with Renzo. And Renzo was like, he pops up. I could feel him like jump to the edge of his chair. Baseball, you want to play baseball?
So Dad would throw to me and I'd play like I was playing first base.
How could he throw the ball to you?
I'd just call out, I'm over here.
Yeah, there you go.
And he'd point and I'd say, yeah, that's right. And then he'd throw it at me.
But that's something I really loved about our relationship. He quickly was looking for possibilities. He wasn't seeing you can't do that. He was like, well, why not?
All right, here we go.
Downey seems to have a knack for finding windows when doors slam shut. Just 9 months after going blind, the recession hit, and he lost his job. But he got word that a nearby firm was designing a rehabilitation center for veterans with sight loss. They were eager to meet a blind architect. What are the chances? You had to believe that God's hand came down.
It took my disability and turned it upside down. All of a sudden, it defined unique, unusual value that virtually nobody else had to offer.
Nobody.
Yeah.
Starting with that job, Downey developed a specialty, making spaces accessible to the blind. He helped design a new eye center at Duke University Hospital, consulted on a job from Microsoft, and signed on to help the visually impaired find their way in San Francisco's new and now delayed 4-block-long Transbay Transit Center, which we visited during construction.
If you're blind, you don't drive, all right? We don't like it when we drive. So, we're committed transit users. So the question was, how on earth do you navigate this size of facility if you're blind?
His solution? Grooves set into the concrete, running the entire length of the platform.
Now we'll just follow this, following those grooves.
With a subtle change from smooth to textured concrete to signal where to turn to get to the escalators.
Would you like to give it a try?
Okay. I know to go straight because of this line, and I feel, oh my, so it's pretty obvious.
I can hear the difference from here.
It's something sighted people may never notice, and that's precisely the point. Downey believes in what's called universal design, that accommodates people with disabilities, but is just as appealing to people without them. It's the approach he used for his biggest project yet, consulting on the total renovation of a new 3-story office space for his old training ground, the Lighthouse for the Blind.
Coming into blindness need not be some dreary social service experience, but rather more like coming into an Apple store, thinking that there might be something fun around the corner.
One of Downey's ideas was to break through and link the 3 floors with an internal staircase that sighted people can see and the blind can hear.
In blindness, it's so wonderful to be on the 9th floor and hear a burst of laughter up on the 11th floor, or to hear somebody playing the piano on the 10th floor.
For the hallways, Downey chose polished concrete because of the acoustics.
I can hear the special tap of somebody's cane or the click of a guide dog's toenails.
Click of a dog's toenail?
Yeah.
Well, is that good or bad?
That's great. It's like you're seeing somebody coming down the hall. I know the sound of individual people who work here by the way they use their cane or the kind of walk they have.
You can really distinguish between people by how they tap their cane.
Absolutely.
If you hadn't had Chris working on this building, a blind architect,
it wouldn't have been as rich or so subtle, for sure.
Last spring marked the 10-year anniversary of Downey losing his sight. So what did he do? He threw a party, a fundraiser for the Lighthouse, where he's been student, architect, and now president of the board.
Maybe a slightly bizarre thing, celebrating my 10-year blind birthday. But when you're 55 and you have a chance to be 10 again, you take it.
I get the feeling that you actually think you're a better architect today.
I'm absolutely convinced I'm a better architect today than I was excited. To the north, okay.
If you could see tomorrow, would you still want to be able to feel the design?
If I were to get my sight back, it would be, I don't know. I would be afraid that I'd sort of lose what I've really been working on. I don't really think about having my sight restored. There's be some logistical liberation to it, but will it make my life better? I don't think so.
Mike and Carol Daly have been married for 53 years. Like more than 5 million American families, they're dealing with dementia. Carol has been suffering from Alzheimer's, the main type of dementia. What makes this story so unusual is that almost every year for the past 10 years, we've interviewed Mike and Carol as Alzheimer's took over her brain. Even though this is intensely personal, they wanted all of us to see the devastating impact of Alzheimer's on each of them over a decade.
We should have brought the bread.
When we first met Carol and Mike in 2008, Carol was active, conversational, and determined to make the best of her failing memory.
How old are you now?
65 now. I think, right?
Yeah.
Carol's memory had been spotty for several years.
I started to notice it at home, and I used to joke about it to my kids. I would say, you know, I think she has Alzheimer's, the way she forgets everything.
Then a doctor told her she really did have Alzheimer's. Mike's mother had had it, now his wife.
Carol, when you heard the word Alzheimer's, what did that do to you?
I was devastated because I saw his mother, what she went through. It's terrible. She was walking the streets in the middle of the night, and we had to bring her home.
As Carol's memory deteriorated, she lost her job at a bank and lost her ability to do a lot of what she'd always done at home.
Did you used to be a good cook?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
What happened?
It stopped. I just couldn't do it.
What couldn't you do?
I didn't know what to do first. The meatloaf.
Oh, the meatloaf was
no,
that was the.
It was terrible. They couldn't eat it.
Because?
I don't know what I did with the ingredients or whatever. They just couldn't eat it.
And you're tearing up. It's upsetting for you.
I don't want to be like this. I really don't. But
Unable to concentrate, Carol had to give up reading and movies. Hard for someone who'd worshipped Clark Gable.
oh, so handsome.
So you remember that?
That I know.
They told us Carol's illness had brought them closer, but they feared the future.
My fear is, I guess, maybe it getting worse, you know, and it probably would.
And it did. Almost 3 years later, when we went back to visit, Carol had no idea how old she was.
80? No, I don't know.
You're actually 67.
67?
67.
Yeah.
And what about her favorite actor?
Do you remember Clark Gable?
Oh, yeah, that was my... Yeah.
Who was he?
Oh, I don't know much now.
Now Mike, a former New York City cop, had to apply her makeup and dress her. But he told us this was his chance to repay all that Carol had done for him.
She had a job, she cleaned house, she did the wash, she made the beds, and she put up with me. So what all that's changed for us is the roles. Now I do the wash, I make the beds, I help Carol.
But that's not what you signed up for.
Yes, I did. when we took our oath, it's for better or for worse. So I did sign up for it in the beginning.
But Mike had put on almost 20 pounds over the last 2 years and started taking pills to reduce anxiety and help him sleep.
The thing is I could sit here and feel sorry for myself, but what is that going to do for me?
At our next meeting, 1 year later, when Carol couldn't come up with words, she answered with laughs.
What kind of thing?
That's not right.
And 3 years since our first visit, she needed constant watching.
I can't go out by myself or not like that. So I always have to have somebody around.
That's a bad feeling.
Yeah.
You've lost your independence.
Yep. But that's what you do.
After all these years, I can't give up. And I'll continue to try. And I pray to God that she goes before me. Because I'm not going to put her in a nursing home. I can handle it. But we live a life.
But that life was a lot tougher when we returned 2 years later. By then, Carol could no longer remember her last name or this.
What's your husband's name?
My husband's?
Your husband's name?
Yeah.
The guy sitting to your left. That big guy who loves you.
Yeah, loves me.
Beyond the memory loss, as Alzheimer's affected more of her brain, it was destroying more of her physical abilities.
She's losing the ability to control her feet, her hands.
It was 6 years ago that I first met you.
Yeah.
And at the time you were shouldering all of the burden.
Right.
And you're still shouldering all of the burden. I mean, how are your shoulders?
They're sore, no doubt about it. But you have to do what you have to do.
Carol. At our next meeting, 2 years later, conversation with Carol was impossible.
It's been almost 8 years since we first met and since we first sat on this couch.
Yeah.
Without making you embarrassed, do you remember my name?
No.
What's this called? What I'm wearing on my wrist. What's the name of that?
I don't know.
It's a wristwatch.
Oh,
Does
yeah.
that sound familiar?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Carol reached a point where she was not able to do anything for herself at all. She couldn't feed herself, couldn't go to the bathroom by herself.
Face me, okay.
And Mike had reached the point where he simply couldn't take care of her by himself. So he hired a home care aide during the day, costing almost $40,000 a year. Now, Alzheimer's was hitting them financially on top of mentally and physically.
What would you say the toll has been of this long journey on you?
I'm dying. I really think I am. The stress, I thought I had a heart attack to begin with.
You had chest pain.
They want to put me in the hospital. I can't go to the hospital. All right, what do I do with Carol? Then she has anxiety attacks, part of the Alzheimer's.
Anxiety attacks may be part of what's happening to you too. It
Yeah.
sounds like if you had chest pain but it wasn't a heart attack, is that what it was, an anxiety attack?
I call it stress.
According to the Alzheimer's Association, the vast majority of caregivers say their toughest challenge is emotional stress.
I can still remember when you said, no
Remember
big deal,
that?
I can handle this.
I think about that comment I made and I said, what a jerk I was.
Well, not a jerk, but just you were sort of near the beginning of your journey and you didn't know.
Yeah. You know, I thought this was it, you know? So she can't remember things. So I see people with dementia, they function normally. She can't walk. The impact on everybody else is enormous today.
1 year later, 14 years since she was first diagnosed, Carol was spending most of her days sitting silently, no longer able to understand questions.
We can't communicate. It's
lonely.
Let me just get them so they go on nicely.
But watch what happened when social worker Dan Cohn put headphones on Carol and played some of her old favorites.
The words aren't there, but the beat is, and the melody is. Melody's pretty good.
In Alzheimer's, older memories are usually the last to go. But even then, a faded, distant memory can sometimes be revived.
And since the music we love is really tied to our emotional system, and our emotional system is still very much intact, that's what we're connecting, and that's what still works.
And it was tied to his emotional system too. He was tearing up.
I think those tears were happy tears, knowing that she hasn't lost it all. You know, it was like, wow, wow.
But the wow did not last. When we met this past January, Carol, now 74, was too far gone to react to music.
She's so changed just since the last time I saw her. And her pulse is as strong as can be and regular. I'm feeling it right now. So her heart seems strong, but she has so deteriorated.
Stand up, Carol, come on.
Earlier that morning, they'd shown us how hard it is to get Carol ready for the day.
What didn't you realize would happen?
That she becomes a vegetable. That's basically what I feel like she is now.
Mike is still too heavy, his blood pressure's too high, and a few months ago, his thoughts were too dark.
I'm ready to put the gun to my head. They really thought of suicide.
Really?
Yeah, it got to that point.
Caregiving is really tough.
Oh, hardest job I ever had.
And that's from a former New York City cop. But suicidal thoughts are not uncommon for people taking care of a family member with dementia. Mike hired more aides, so Carol now has 24-hour help. It's draining his savings, but allowing him to get out of the house and make new friends. And that's helping lift his depression.
I leave this at home, and when I go out, it's a new Mike out there now.
But at home, he worries that Carol is in danger.
Has she fallen?
Yes.
She hasn't broken any bones?
No.
Yet.
Just bruises, no.
So now, despite years of telling us he wouldn't put Carol in a nursing home,
I'm coming to the point where maybe a nursing home is the answer for her safety.
10 days after that, and 53 years after their wedding day, Mike did put Carol in a nursing home.
Do you still love her?
I loved Carol, who was Carol, but now Carol's not Carol anymore.
When Carol was still Carol, that would have been the best time to discuss the kind of caregiving decisions Mike Daly eventually had to face alone. Mike hopes that sharing such intimate details of their lives will help others be better prepared than they were.
This is a story about the cruelest disease you have never heard of. It's called Frontotemporal Dementia, or FTD. And given the devastating toll it takes on its victims and their families, it ought to be much better known than it is. FTD is the #1 form of dementia in Americans under the age of 60. What causes it is unclear, but it attacks the frontal and temporal lobes of the brain which control personality and speech, and it's always fatal. It is not Alzheimer's disease, which degrades the part of the brain responsible for memory. With FTD, people either display such bizarre behavior that their loved ones can hardly recognize them, or they lose the ability to recognize themselves. That's what happened to Tracy Lind one day a few years ago as she was standing in a public restroom.
I was washing my hands and I looked in the mirror and I did not recognize my own face.
Didn't recognize yourself?
No, I looked in the mirror and I kept looking. I remember I kept looking at this woman, wondering who was she?
This is who she was, the Very Reverend Tracy Lind, Dean of the Episcopal Cathedral in Cleveland, Ohio, one of the city's most prominent preachers and civic leaders. She was 61 years old when both she and her spouse, Emily Ingalls, began to notice trouble with things Tracy had always done very well, like finding the right word, recognizing congregants and friends' faces, and, of course, her own.
That's when I said, oh man, I got to go see a doctor.
When that happened, were you scared?
Oh, I was scared to death.
Emily, what did you think was happening?
I thought there's something not right with her brain.
On Election Day 2016, Tracy Lind got the diagnosis, frontotemporal dementia. She has what's called the speech variant of the disease, which, among other things, attacks the part of the brain where language lives.
Sometimes you're fine and you're on. And then there are other times that the words just don't come out. I mean, even if I know what the word is, sometimes I feel like I'm playing bingo. And when I find the word, I shout it. I feel like an imbecile. You know, apple, oh yeah, apple, that's it. And I get all excited.
This is acutely painful for Tracy because being a powerful, effective speaker has always been at the core of her identity.
One of the first things you did once you got this diagnosis was to resign from your job as dean at Trinity Cathedral. Why did you take that action so quickly?
Mainly I knew I was starting to fail, even though I was faking it pretty well.
Since stepping down, Tracy and Emily have traveled around the country and the world speaking and preaching about her FTD, or as Tracy puts it, telling the story of dementia from the inside out.
I was determined to live what I had been preaching for over 30 years, that out of pain comes joy.
I'm gonna face this disease called FTD that I'd never heard of before, and I'm gonna see what I can do with it.
I don't know if you are aware of how unique this situation is, that you are in the middle of this decline from dementia, and yet you're so able to articulate what that's like.
I am aware of that. I think my curiosity is what's getting me through it. Because otherwise, Bill, I'm just gonna lay down and roll up in a ball.
Tracy says she has good days and bad days. Just in our interview, there were moments when she was completely in control and moments when she wasn't.
And I'm doing some, you know, I know there's no,
Do you want help?
Can you help, please?
Okay.
This is the way this very sad illness presents.
Dr. Bruce Miller may be the world's leading expert on frontotemporal dementia. He runs a lab at the University of California, San Francisco that's doing cutting-edge research on the two main forms of FTD, the speech variant that Tracy Lind has, and a behavioral variant that attacks personality, judgment, and empathy.
Pleasure to see you both again.
On the day we visited Dr. Miller's clinic, he and his team met with FTD patient Thomas Cox and his wife, Laurie. At first glance, Thomas seems fine, but he's not.
I've got an FTD.
Okay. And has it affected you so far?
No.
In fact, Laurie Cox says that starting a few years ago, Thomas lost interest in her, in their son, and in his work, so much that he was fired from his job. By now, he's pretty much reduced to looking at photos on his phone.
That's Bugatti.
That's our dog.
Your dog.
I can blame the disease. I can say that the disease stole my husband.
When a family sees someone with this illness, they don't recognize them. This is not the person I married that I love. This is not my father or my mother.
You have said that FTD attacks people at the very soul of their humanity.
This is profound as anything that can happen to a human being. It robs us of our very essence, of our humanity, of who we are.
Bruce Miller says because so many cases are first misdiagnosed as mental illness, it takes an average of 3 years and several expensive brain scans to get a correct diagnosis of FTD.
So whether it's 20,000 new cases every year, 100,000, 200,000, we still don't know. But in young people with neurodegeneration, frontotemporal dementia is a big one.
So if you see someone who is suffering dementia at a younger age,
very strong likelihood that it's FTD.
Dr. Miller showed us this composite image of 2 of the major degenerative brain diseases.
Frontotemporal dementia, shown in blue, Alzheimer's disease, shown in red. So very different geography, very different clinical manifestations.
What does the blue indicate?
The blue is that there's loss of tissue. When we see loss of tissue in that brain region, we know people have lost their interest in life, their drive, they do less, they care less about other people.
That loss of empathy, Miller says, can produce dangerous, impulsive, even criminal behavior, and those with behavioral FTD are rarely aware that anything has changed.
He went from being a caring, doting father and husband, and it just seemed like he'd flipped a switch off, and he had no idea that he'd changed. He had no idea.
Amy Johnson and her husband Mark married in 2006, settled in the small Minnesota town of Windham, and now have 4 young children, 3 boys and a girl. 3 years ago, Amy says, Mark suddenly seemed to stop caring about her and the kids.
That's the first time that I really remember thinking to myself, what happened? Where did you go?
Amy recalls a day when she left Mark in charge of their sons, then 3 and 2, only to come home and find the boys playing outside, alone, by a busy street, while Mark sat inside watching TV, oblivious. On other days, he began to display compulsive behavior she had never seen before.
He couldn't stop eating. I started locking the food up. He would walk down to the grocery store and buy more. I took his credit card. He'd walk down to the grocery store and steal food.
I mean, these changes that you saw, did you ask him what's going on?
Yeah, and he just said, oh, I don't think anything's different, is it?
It was. Mark began making inappropriate remarks to a female coworker at the company where he worked as a manufacturing engineer.
He was fired.
Mm-hmm. And his reaction was, oh, well, I guess okay. So what's for supper tonight?
What was your reaction?
I was just devastated. I was 7 months pregnant at the time with our daughter.
With your 4th child?
With my 4th child.
So as this progresses, what's the eventual outcome?
Outcome of this is always death.
Always death.
Always death. We have no way of intervening yet to slow the progression.
As FTD corrodes the brain, it also eventually causes bodily functions to shut down. That's what leads to death. But Bruce Miller is optimistic, pointing to promising research, both in his lab and funded by NIH grants to scientists around the country.
Suddenly we have interventions and research that are going on that give me great hope.
When might you expect a breakthrough?
I'm hoping in the next 5 years that we will have very powerful therapies in certain variants of frontotemporal dementia that may stop it cold.
Tracy Lind and Emily Ingalls have no idea whether any breakthrough will come in time to help them. If not, Tracy will eventually lose the ability to speak at all, and then the ability to swallow.
The not being able to swallow part, that's what's really frightening. So I try to live in the present moment.
I'm not very good at living in the moment, so I worry a lot about the future.
Do you worry about taking care of me?
Yeah, I worry about taking care of you. Sure.
What's going to be the hardest part?
I think the hardest part is going to be the loss of the relationship.
Has Emily told you this before?
No, I don't think so.
As you can see, caregivers suffer as much as patients. For months, Amy Johnson kept Mark at home, even as she mothered 4 small children and held a full-time job. But his symptoms got worse and worse.
When did it become clear to you that you had to put him in a facility?
I went to an appointment with a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and she said, I think it's time for you to look for a different place. Because now when he thinks of something, the part of his brain that tells him that's a bad idea doesn't work anymore.
Mark Johnson now lives in a facility about an hour away from home. He's gained nearly 100 pounds due to compulsive eating, even walking into elderly residents' rooms and taking their food. Amy says his care now costs her nearly $7,000 a month.
Out of pocket?
Out of pocket. He would be devastated to know that that's where his retirement savings are going and that they're not going to his family.
Crippling costs are common for FTD families, and it's often tough to find a facility to care for patients like Mark Johnson. The assisted living industry is not set up for 6'3", 40-year-olds.
How's it going? This is Bill.
How are you? Very nice to meet you.
Amy visits Mark as often as she can and invited us to come along one afternoon. He told us he'd just like to go home.
Do you think you need help?
No.
So do you understand why you're here?
No.
Think you'd be okay at home?
Yeah.
I think Amy thinks, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I think she thinks this is the best place for you right now.
Okay.
After another minute, Mark said, "All right, see ya," and we left him.
Big hug.
Okay.
It's clearly painful for Amy to see what FTD has done to her husband and to know what it will do.
They gave him 2 to 5 years to live, and
2 to 5 years.
2 to 5 years.
So how are you doing now?
It depends on the day. I miss him a lot.
We don't often think about how the sense of touch makes our lives possible. We grip a paper coffee cup with perfect force to hold it, but not crush it. Our feet always find the floor. But for people with artificial limbs or those with spinal injuries, the loss of touch can put the world beyond their grasp. 17 years ago, the Defense Department launched a $100 million project to revolutionize prosthetic limbs. The robotics you're about to see is amazing, but as we first reported earlier this year, even more remarkable is how the feeling of feeling is returning to people like Brandon Prestwood.
For me, it was a battle if I wanted to live or die.
You weren't sure you wanted to live?
No. I didn't know if I wanted to or not.
Brandon Prestwood's battle began with the loss of his left hand. In 2012, he was on a maintenance crew reassembling an industrial conveyor belt when someone turned it on.
My arm was dragged in pretty much up to the shoulder. It crushed my bones in my arm and fed my arm through a gap about 1 inch.
How did they save your life?
The other maintenance guys jumped in. They started basically taking the machine back apart. Once we got it back apart, I could look in and see what was there, and one of the gentlemen was a Vietnam veteran.
And the Vietnam veteran knew what to do?
Yeah.
The Vietnam veteran knew tourniquets, but Prestwood lost his hand and couldn't return to his job.
Go eat this.
Yeah, that sounds good.
After 4 years with a hook, he told his wife Amy he wanted to volunteer for experimental research involving surgery at the VA.
I was not 100% on board to start with, but I knew he had his mind set that he had to do this, and I couldn't hold him back.
6 years later, thanks to Defense Department and VA projects, Prestwood controls this hand with nothing but his thoughts.
Everything still feel good?
Probably when I get her turned around here.
Electrodes implanted in muscles in his arm pick up his brain's electrical signals for movement. A computer translates those signals to the hand.
How about the middle finger now?
Sensors in the plastic fingers are connected to nerves in his arm to return a basic sense of touch.
Close your eyes, tell me when you're feeling each of these.
Which he can demonstrate with his eyes closed.
Pinky. Index.
That's not bad.
Middle.
Still requires a little bit, but it's not bad.
Biomedical engineer Dustin Tyler leads this research at Case Western Reserve University and the Cleveland VA.
Touch is about connection. It's connection to the world, it's about connection to others, and it's connection to yourself, right? I mean, we never experience not having touch. It's the largest sensory organ on our body. All right, so go ahead.
Tyler first attempted an artificial connection in 2012. He switched it on in a volunteer and wondered what would happen.
So I was concerned, would it be his whole hand? Would it be painful? Would it not feel anything? We had no idea. So one of those big moments in my career was he came in, we first turned on the stimulus, and he kind of stopped for a second, and he goes, "That's my thumb. That's the tip of my thumb."
This happened right away. It didn't require any training of the brain.
No, that was the beauty of it. My thumb.
Brandon Presswood remembers the instant it happened to him.
That's my fingers. I'm feeling my fingers that I don't have anymore. I'm feeling them.
A definite feeling, he told us, but different.
It doesn't feel exactly like my right hand. It's a tingling sensation. It's not painful. It's kind of like if your hand's been to sleep, right at the end, right before it wakes up, for me, it's pleasant. It's a pleasant tingling.
Let's see if you can do it on Cherry here.
A tingling that's light with a light touch, but grows stronger the harder he presses. Eyes closed, he can pinch a cherry firmly enough to pull it from its stem, but not crush it.
You can feel this is light.
I had to use my lightest touch. So if I hold this right here with an empty eggshell.
I can feel that. I feel it here and here.
It's a feeling more than a decade in the making. At the beginning of this research, how did you even imagine that this would be possible?
I didn't imagine. I imagined that it was not going to be possible.
Sleeman Benzmaya at the University of Chicago is among the world's leading experts on the neuroscience of touch. In 2008, he joined the Defense Department's project to revolutionize prosthetics, but he didn't think the Pentagon knew what it was up against.
There are 100 billion neurons in the brain, interconnected with 100 trillion synapses. I mean, the human brain is like the most complex system in the known universe.
Too complex, he believed, to target electrical stimulation to exactly the right neurons.
And when we electrically stimulate, we activate hundreds, thousands of them at the same time in ways that would never happen naturally. It just seemed like that very impoverished interface with this nervous system would never be able to do anything useful. And turns out I was wrong.
He was proved wrong by his own research.
How you doing, Scott? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Scott. With volunteers including Scott Embry. And you can feel that.
I feel it on my fingertips.
Whose movement and sense of touch are limited by a spinal injury from a car accident. Computer ports in Embry's skull are wired to the motor and sensory parts of his brain. Electrodes pick up the brain's electrical signals that were intended for the muscles. A computer translates those signals to the robot arm. We first saw this brain-machine interface 10 years ago at the University of Pittsburgh, but back then there was no sensation.
Index finger?
In collaboration with Pitt, neuroscientist Sleeman Benzmea showed that signals for touch could be returned to the brain.
How can you possibly know what part of the brain is the tip of the index finger?
We took Scott and we put him in a functional magnetic resonance imaging scanner. And then we had him imagine moving his thumb, imagine moving his index, imagine moving his digits as we monitored his brain activity. And lo and behold, the sensory and motor parts of the brain that are involved in the hand lit up.
Middle, ring, index.
There are challenges. Eventually, the brain builds scar tissue at the implants, limiting the motor electrodes. But one patient's implants have lasted 8 years and counting. Scott Embry's have been working more than 2 years.
You have been a subject of this work for years now.
Yes, sir.
And I wonder why.
I wanted to have someone else have the opportunity to become independent again.
The most meaningful work of your life.
Yes, sir. 100%.
The greatest independence might be no prosthetic at all. And we saw this astounding possibility with a pioneer, Austin Beggin. His brain impulses are rooted not to a robot, but to implants in his own arm that fire his muscles. What function did you have in this hand before the implants?
Oh, absolutely none.
Nothing. Yeah. You couldn't move it at all.
No, so the only thing I can do really is shrug my shoulders and kind of shift them. Unfortunately, that was all that came back after my accident.
His accident was on a vacation celebrating his college graduation. Diving into a submerged sandbar left him quadriplegic. Now, motor and sensory impulses flow through the ports in Begin's skull and a computer, bypassing his damaged spine.
Relax, close.
The research is led by Bolu Ajiboye, a biomedical engineer at Case Western Reserve University.
Our goal is to restore complete functionality of the upper arm, including dexterous hand function and the ability to reach out, so that Austin and others who have suffered severe spinal cord injury can regain some level of functional independence.
Bring my arm forward.
The cradle under his arm only supports the weight. All of the motion is his own. It takes effort. He has to concentrate.
A little bit quicker. Open hand, relax hand, close hand, relax hand, open hand, relax hand.
And the computer needs frequent adjustment.
How'd that feel?
Good.
Good.
But his parents, Shelley and Brad, showed us where this could lead.
Carrot, or would you like to have a nice granola bar?
I'll take the granola bar.
Yeah, I figured.
Begin retained limited feeling after his injury, which makes him ideal for evaluating the artificial sense of touch.
Pointer finger. So if I can extend first.
His motor skills.
Let me open my hand for you.
Continue to grow.
And squeeze around it. You'll feel me really start to dig in right there.
You got a grip.
Yeah, it really is. I'm let go, yeah. And I'll bring the arm back up.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Amazing advances are coming quickly. Danny Werner lost his foot in Vietnam.
It's on.
But 47 years later, he was reconnected to touch in an artificial foot.
Can you feel that on your toes?
Yep.
Which helps him balance, climb stairs, and walk on uneven ground. Brandon Prestwood's next device will replace some wiring with Bluetooth connections.
Especially the thumb. Thumb's spot on.
The cost of his experimental rig and surgery is estimated at roughly $200,000. But an eventual commercial system may cost significantly less, while delivering moments that are priceless. What did that mean to you, to feel Amy's hand in yours?
The world. I was a whole person again. I didn't have to worry about those dark thoughts creeping back in.
It's just giving me back my husband, who means the world to me. He's his self again.
Himself, because the feeling of feeling is so much of what makes us human. Maybe that's why, when we see a tender moment, it is said to be touching.
I love you.
It has the ring of a Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale, if a supremely ironic one. Tiny Denmark is home to 6 million of the world's wealthiest and healthiest people, all those muesli-munching cyclists. Even their letter O's sometimes come slashed in half. But Denmark is also home to what is suddenly Europe's largest company, Novo Nordisk, a pharmaceutical firm with a market cap of $500 billion thanks to products that, wait for it, combat obesity. Novo's drugs Ozempic and Wegovy have slimmed down Hollywood stars and millions of non-celebrities worldwide, while adding great heft to Denmark's economy. We traveled to the Baltic to see how a country with a slender ego is coping with this most unlikely injection of fantastic wealth. Just another Copenhagen commuter headed off to work in the morning, Lotte Berenutsen goes unnoticed. First on the train, then, pep in her step, walking from the station to the office she shares with 2 others. Understating matters, as one does in Denmark, you'd never know from appearances that she is the scientist whose research at Novo Nordisk led to perhaps the most revolutionary drug this century.
I'm so grateful. I've always just been a nerdy little scientist who kind of found home here in this company for 35 years.
Is that really your sense of self still these days?
I'm proud, but I'm also humble and really very focused on the fact that it was a team effort.
Modesty aside, her discoveries helped create Ozempic and Wegovy, which not only treat type 2 diabetes and obesity, but are now approved for treating cardiovascular disease as well. This, of course, has made her a billion, not so fast.
You know, I'm actually not super interested in actually having a whole lot of money. I don't think that it doesn't look like it's making people happy, right?
Money's not something that's
I like
important
to
to
pay
you.
my taxes. I like the society that we live in. I like that there's equal access to healthcare. I really like that.
Long as you brought it up, let's get this out of the way. There is very little rotten in the state of Denmark. This is the land that gave us Lego, province of peddling, all fishing nets and safety nets. And today, Novo Nordisk's success and the spike in demand for Ozempic is fattening the country's economy, creating thousands of jobs, bolstering national pension plans, keeping mortgage rates low. Novo now has a market cap larger than the entire country's GDP. Giving rise to a new national emblem. Drugs so popular they've become embedded in pop culture, at least in the US, where the company advertises liberally, including on this broadcast. But in Denmark, pharmaceutical advertising is illegal.
This is very, very unfamiliar for Danish persons. This kind of advertisement. They wouldn't like it. It's not very Danish.
Peter Lund Madsen is a celebrated neurologist and writer, and like most Danes, delighted that America's demand for Novo Nordisk's drugs is Denmark's gain. Help us understand where this company fits in the Danish national consciousness right now.
Novo is a part of Denmark because we are a small country, and finally we have a big company in Europe, much bigger than anything the Swedes have. So we like that notion.
You can hold us over the Swedes.
Yes. Because they've always had cars and airplanes and big companies, but now we have Novo.
Take that,
means a lot.
IKEA.
Yes. It's the first time.
Danishness courses through Novo Nordisk's bloodstream. The company was founded in the early 1920s by August Krogh, a Nobel laureate, and his wife Marie, a doctor. Their motivation wasn't financial, it was personal. Marie was diagnosed with diabetes, at the time, a death sentence. This drug that we're seeing right here helped save the life of Marie.
It did. She was very discreet about it. She did not want anybody to know that she was diabetic because Marie was a doctor. She was not a patient.
Hanne Sindbæk, a Danish journalist, has written 2 books about Novo Nordisk and the Crows. We spoke to her in a lecture theater in what was the Danish medical school where the Crows first met. Is it fair to say that this origin story of Novo Nordisk starts as a love story?
It is absolutely fair to say. He was teaching her as she was a medical student. He fell in love with her right away.
When, in 1922, they heard that Canadian scientists had stumbled upon a miracle cure for diabetes, insulin, they traveled to Toronto and came home with the rights to manufacture the drug in Scandinavia. Sounds very nice of the Canadian scientists. Did they ask for anything else in return?
They asked that person should profit from it. It should be to the benefit of humanity. That was the price, you can say. It was a way to get this life-saving drug out in the world fast.
Back in Denmark, within months, they set up the Nordisk Insulin Company. In keeping with their agreement, they established a nonprofit foundation, which today controls 77% of the company's voting shares.
So the agreement was that if there were revenues and proceeds from the sales of insulin here in Scandinavia, it should be returned to society in the form of support for research into physiology and medicine.
Mats Krogsgaard is the foundation's CEO. Today, it is the largest philanthropic organization in the world, bigger than the Gates Foundation.
This is actually a 384 plate that Karen has there.
While Novo Nordisk always focused on diabetes drugs, it did branch out beyond medicine. In the late 80s, young Lotte Knudsen was assigned to the enzyme team, which had the noble goal of making sure reds and whites didn't run in the wash.
You started with laundry detergent.
Yes, I did. Yeah. It's the same story, right, of just wanting to make a product that's useful.
In the early 90s, she came across a new study about a naturally occurring gut hormone, GLP-1, that lowered blood sugar levels and suppressed appetite. She thought if it could be harnessed into a drug, it could revolutionize treatment for diabetes and obesity. She went to her boss, Novo's head of research, Mats Krogsgaard. Yes, the same guy who now heads the foundation.
What do you remember about her?
She was the first one to march into my office with red hair and very fired up, showing me a publication that was not even published yet. She was talking very agitatedly about this, and I was getting excited.
I understand you also had to convince senior management about obesity and what it was, that this wasn't a behavioral choice necessarily.
They felt just go up on a bike, do some jogging, do some biking.
Just get off the couch and exercise.
Yeah, and I started trying to convince them that it's not getting on the bike. If you're genetically predisposed, living in the environment we are in today, you're at very high risk and something should be done about that.
For the next 20 years, they worked on that GLP-1 molecule before Ozempic finally made it to market as a type 2 diabetes drug. It took another 4 years for Wegovy to be approved for weight loss. It turned Novo Nordisk from niche player to a company bigger than Coca-Cola and Procter & Gamble. The CEO is Lars Frøygaard Jørgensen. So typically Danish, his compensation package of roughly $10 million is dwarfed by his U.S. counterparts. His office is a co-working space atop Novo's Copenhagen headquarters, designed in the shape of an insulin molecule.
So your next building needs to be the molecule of an anti-obesity drug.
Yes, it should.
Jørgensen is only the 5th chief executive since the company was founded. Ask him about the weight of the job, and no CEO God complex here, he defaults to the company mantra, the Novo Nordisk way.
Yeah, so the Novo Nordisk way is the basic thinking of our founders and key elements linked to how we treat each other, how we collaborate, and that's about being open and honest. It's all about being accountable.
This sounds almost like a cult, a religious movement, and not so much a pharmaceutical firm.
I think the values are based on ordinary, human, decent values.
You appreciate you're not sounding very much like an American CEO right now.
Well, I think I'm very grounded as an individual. My upbringing has given me a lot of, groundedness.
And in Denmark, chief executives are expected to be grounded.
In Denmark, it's very unrespectable to flash their money. Rich people in Denmark, they tend to buy cheaper cars. in order to stay out of trouble.
So the CEO of Novo Nordisk, if he's driving around Copenhagen in a Ferrari or a limousine, how does that play?
Poorly. But the other way around, if he was driving around in a cheap car, that would be a very good thing for him. Oh, I like his driving such a car. He's a true Dane.
But for all of Novo Nordisk's Danish high-mindedness, there is a growing chorus of complaint in America.
Stop ripping us off.
As an avowed socialist, Bernie Sanders may find plenty to like about Denmark. But at a Senate hearing in September, Sanders excoriated Jorgensen over allegations of price gouging. The CEO told the committee what he told us. The benefits of Novo's drugs to global health will ultimately save trillions of dollars. And if anything is to blame for the high prices, it's the fractured U.S. healthcare system. What is the response to the skeptical American that says, come on, this is big pharma, this pricing is predatory, they're making money off people with health problems, this is not utopia, this is just another big greedy business?
Of course it's greedy. You have to compete in the world as it is, and I don't think that Novo Nordisk has all these values just to be nice. They have it because it's good business.
They're not blind to capitalism, that there will be rivals.
Absolutely not. They're capitalists at heart. But you can be a capitalist with great values.
And to keep up with the global demand for Novo's drugs, less than 1% of sales come from inside Denmark, the company is sinking billions into new plants worldwide. And just a few miles down the road from the cranes in the Danish countryside sits this quintessential Scandinavian institution. Half boarding school, half summer camp, and state subsidized, of course. It's a health facility for the small portion of Danes who are diagnosed with obesity. Recently, enrollment has declined by almost half, and some of the empty beds are being filled by, get this, newly recruited Novo employees as they try to find permanent housing.
That's a way we can gain a little money. Now we have less students, so.
Bit of an irony, right?
Yeah, it is.
Lars Jorgensen has been a therapist and life coach here for 20 years. When you heard these drugs were coming on the market from Denmark, did you think, oh boy, this could impact us?
Yes, we did.
So if somebody says, I'm just going to take these anti-obesity drugs rather than come here, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to think about what made you eat too much in the first place. What was that about? Why you need to take medicine? And for some people, it would be a perfect solution, no doubt about that. But for many people, it will not be, because they still have the problem that obesity is just a symptom.
That this goes way beyond what the scale says.
Exactly.
On a more macro level, Novo Nordisk's runaway success is beginning to shrink entire sectors of the global economy. Fast food, big box stores, even Krispy Kreme. They're already tightening their belts in a universe where people are less hungry. Still, there are competitors and counterfeits out there. And Chinese companies are already in clinical trials for generics. But for now, the world's weight surplus remains the Danes' and Peter Lund Madsen's economic surplus. Do you own Novo Nordisk stock?
Yes, I have for many years, like many other people in Denmark.
How are you feeling about your investment?
Everybody has the feeling that this will go on forever. And they are very, yes, happy.
Bird flu has been circling the globe for decades, so the discovery in 2024 that the deadly pathogen had jumped from a wild bird to a cow came as a shock to virus watchers. Now, in just over a year, the virus has ripped through America's dairy herds and poultry flocks. It has jumped to other mammals, including humans. 70 Americans have caught the virus. One has died. Long feared as a possible pandemic, doctors and veterinarians fighting the virus told us Biden's government was slow to act, while the Trump administration has now laid off more than 100 key scientists, all as the virus keeps spreading.
At present, we're given a stick, and they put a blindfold on us, and then we're sent into a gunfight, and we're losing. We are losing.
Veterinarian Dr. Kay Russo told us we are running out of time to stop bird flu. She was called in when the virus H5N1 hit this dairy herd in Colorado last summer. It cost the farm about $400,000 to treat its sick cattle. Most recovered. Some protective gear?
Yep.
But as an added precaution, we suited up to ensure we didn't bring anything onto the farm ourselves. There's no front or
There's no front or back. It's high fashion.
It's real high fashion. It's not clear how bird flu is spread from cow to cow, but milking equipment is a prime suspect. The virus is thought to linger on the auto milker, waiting for the next cow. Workers here in milking parlors have also fallen sick. So what concerns you the most?
The pandemic potential for a virus like this one. And that is the worst case scenario, right? And ultimately one we want to avoid. I can't say that that's going to happen, but we don't want to play with fire.
It started in Texas. In early 2024, cows were suffering from a mysterious disease. Their fevers spiked, their milk dried up. They were coughing, drooling, lethargic. Soon, there were more sick cattle in neighboring states. Kay Russo joined a conference call of worried vets to try to figure it out.
I started asking questions. What are the birds doing on the farm? And one of the veterinarians replied, well, they're all dead.
So they're seeing dead birds on the farms?
Yep. We started to see the cats that were demonstrating neurologic symptoms. And more alarmingly, the workers were complaining of flu-like symptoms.
Tests confirmed Russo's worst fears. H5N1 had jumped to cattle for the first time. In past outbreaks, bird flu has often been deadly in people.
If you look at cases worldwide of H5 influenza, the mortality rate's 50%. And so we're all kind of, talking to each other, what does this mean? And that was a scary space to be in.
Despite the urgency, Russo and other vets told us the Biden administration was slow to act. It was a month before the U.S. Department of Agriculture required cows to be tested before interstate travel, and 10 months before a raw milk testing program was launched. Today, some states test weekly, some hardly at all. Do we have enough information about how this virus is spreading?
I would say today, no. And that comes down to boots on the ground where you have a strike force that comes in the middle of an outbreak and just starts collecting data.
Russo told us, at the moment, the virus has the upper hand.
I think it's a numbers game. And the more we let it move unchecked, the more likely we're going to have even a bigger mess on our hands.
Poultry farmers have had to kill tens of millions of birds, removing them with trailers and driving egg prices sky high. Now, a new strain of bird flu has been discovered in cattle. It has led to more severe disease in some people.
This is a threat that is very significant and very real. And I recognize also this is a moment where it's easy to sound like an alarmist. What I'm here to tell you is this is a very serious threat to humanity. And the longer we let this persist, the greater the risks are going to be.
Dr. Cameron Kahn is an infectious disease physician in Toronto. His company, Blue Dot, was among the first to flag the virus in China that became the COVID pandemic. Kahn told us bird flu is just as concerning. He showed us how fast the virus has spread among dairy cattle.
This seems like almost a wildfire to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, add in poultry outbreaks.
So this is virtually the whole country.
Pretty much.
Next, Dr. Cameron Kahn showed us a map of all the confirmed human cases of bird flu in the last 5 years. Most have been in Asia, until now.
What you start to see around 2024 is you start to see a case in Texas, and then you start to see this sudden, rapid increase in cases across the country.
All over the place.
What's happening here is wild birds have infected cows, who have then infected other cows, who have then infected humans. And so there's this complex web of all of these different animal species now passing the virus in different directions.
Is this one of those things you have never seen before?
The world has never seen this kind of situation, and it's showing us that the virus is capable of adaptation if you allow it. It will just get better and better at infecting other mammals, including potentially humans.
Most of the confirmed cases in the U.S. have been farm workers. Most had mild symptoms. The one person who died had underlying health conditions. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention say the virus still poses a low risk to the general public, but Khan told us many cases are going undetected.
Why do you say that?
So in a recent study of dairy workers, their blood was tested for antibodies to H5N1, not looking for the virus, but looking for the immune system's memory of this virus. And it turns out that 7% of them, 1 out of roughly every 15 workers, actually had antibodies to H5N1.
People are not generally getting very sick from this.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the reason for all the alarm?
Yeah. Influenza is a particularly formidable virus. It is constantly changing. And the more that we allow it to evolve and adapt by infecting people, I mean, this is kind of Darwinian evolution here, right? It can change in ways that actually make it even more deadly or more easily transmissible or even resist against some of the antiviral medications that we have.
Khan told us every new infection increases the odds bird flu could lead to severe disease, as we saw during COVID. In North America, 6 people now have ended up in the hospital with bird flu. More worrying, 5 people had no known exposure to sick animals. One girl in Mexico died 2 weeks ago.
We are really at risk of this virus evolving into one that has pandemic potential. And the reality is none of us know whether this is next week or next year or never. I don't think it's never. But it may be here far sooner than any of us would like.
Many scientists told us vaccines could be our best defense. There is a vaccine for bird flu, but it has not been licensed by the Food and Drug Administration. Moderna has a new one, but the Trump administration has paused its final funding. There are vaccines for poultry, too, but they haven't been used because many of America's trading partners will not import vaccinated birds. A glimmer of hope? The USDA's milk testing program.
This is repurposed from COVID testing from 3 or 4 years ago.
Dr. Keith Paulson is director of the Wisconsin Veterinary Diagnostic Lab, part of the USDA's plan to test raw milk for H5N1. Pasteurization kills the virus, but raw milk can be loaded with it.
Is this where you would identify the virus?
Yeah, and it can detect even just one positive cow in a group of 1,000.
45 states are now doing some form of testing. Paulson told us it's helped to slow the spread of the virus in some states.
When you see the outbreak curve level off or start to decline, do you go like, phew, we dodged one?
I don't think we go phew until we're deactivated our lab. We're still in outbreak response mode, and while we may have fewer detections, we know that there are still viruses circulating based on all the data from the virologists that we're talking to, and we want to make sure that we catch it fast.
The CDC is trying to ramp up its testing, but there's another problem. Almost half of farm workers are undocumented and may be reluctant to be tested.
If we're not testing people, if we're not looking for people who might get it, if we're not looking for evidence of an early cluster of human-to-human transmission, then we're going to miss it.
Dr. Angela Rasmussen is an American virologist working in Canada. Rasmussen told us it's not just the number of human cases that is alarming, but that the virus is jumping to more mammals. Every new spillover gives the virus another chance to evolve and potentially spread person to person.
So we are now seeing the viruses spread from birds to cattle and now to foxes, goats, pigs, rats, cats, raccoons.
The fact that this virus can infect so many different types of mammals is a huge concern in terms of its ability to infect people.
One of your colleagues told us that if this should spiral into a pandemic, this flu could make COVID look like a walk in the park.
I agree.
You're scaring me.
I'm scared about it myself. I don't sleep very much these days, Bill.
Rasmussen was among the scientists given expert briefings by the Biden administration in 2024. She told us Biden's team miscalculated the threat at first.
It was some gambling and some wishful thinking this isn't actually going to be that big of a deal. And it turns out it was a very big deal.
Has the Trump administration gotten its arms around this problem?
No, I would say is the short answer. But the longer answer is that I don't actually entirely know what is going on.
Why is that?
Many of the people who were working on this, at least at CDC, have been fired from the federal government. So the influenza division at CDC has been decimated. And in fact, there is a communications ban that has been put on these federal workers.
What do you think of that?
I think it's insane, actually, that I have to have conversations on encrypted messaging apps with my colleagues who I would normally just send emails to.
Hundreds of federal scientists and health workers who track bird flu have been laid off. Some may be rehired. The CDC declined to answer our questions, saying it continues to respond to the H5N1 bird flu outbreak. Colorado vet Kay Russo and others told us they feel stymied. The current distrust of science and vaccines is hurting their fight to try to prevent the next pandemic.
I would scorch the earth if this ends up in children deaths. And so as a mother, as a veterinarian, as a scientist, I'm just asking you trust us, because I will do everything in my power, and there's plenty folks behind me that will do the same to keep this from getting to that point.
How often have you wondered what your spouse is really thinking, or your boss, or the guy sitting across from you on the bus? We all take as a given that we'll never really know for sure. The content of our thoughts is our own, private, secret, unknowable by anyone else, until now, that is. Neuroscience research into how we think and what we're thinking is advancing at a stunning rate, making it possible for the first time in human history to peer directly into the brain to read out the physical makeup of our thoughts. Some would say, to read our minds.
This is the technology that is transforming what once was science fiction into just plain science. It's a specialized use of MRI scanning called functional MRI, fMRI for short, that makes it possible to see what's going on inside the brain while people are thinking.
Every time I walk into that scanner room and I see the person's brain appear on the screen, when I see those patterns, it is just incredible, unthinkable.
Mind reading, what do you call it?
Thought identification.
Whatever you want to call it, what neuroscientist Marcel Just and his colleague Tom Mitchell at Carnegie Mellon University have done is combine fMRI's ability to look at the brain in action with computer science's new power to sort through massive amounts of data. The goal? To see if they could identify exactly what happens in the brain when people think specific thoughts.
Okay, are you ready to get started?
They did an experiment where they asked subjects to think about 10 objects, 5 of them tools like screwdriver and hammer, and 5 of them dwellings like igloo and castle, then recorded and analyzed the activity in their brains for each. You had them think about a screwdriver, and the computer found the place in the brain where that person was thinking screwdriver?
Screwdriver isn't one place in the brain, it's many places in the brain. When you think of a screwdriver, you think about how you hold it, how you twist it, what it looks like, what you use it for.
And each of those functions are in different places?
Correct.
Just as when we think screwdriver, or igloo for example, neurons start firing at varying levels of intensity in different areas throughout the brain.
And we found that we could identify which object they were thinking about from their brain activation patterns.
You're reading their mind.
We're identifying the thought that's occurring. It's
Whoa.
incredible, just incredible.
Are you saying that if you think of a hammer, that your brain is identical to my brain when I think of a hammer?
Not identical. We have idiosyncrasies. Maybe I've had a bad experience with a hammer and you haven't, but it's close enough to identify each other's thoughts. So, that was never known before.
We asked if his team was up for a challenge. Would they take our associate producer, Megan Frank, whose brain had never been scanned before, and see if the computer could identify her thoughts? Justin Mitchell agreed to give it a try and see if they could do it in almost real time.
So you've never done an instant analysis, as we might say on television?
Nobody's done this ever.
That's actually her brain?
That's her brain.
Inside the scanner, Megan was shown a series of 10 items and asked to think for a few seconds about each one.
If it all comes out right, when she's thinking hammer, the computer will know she's thinking hammer.
Right. Okay, we're all done.
So Megan,
Yes.
how was it?
It wasn't bad.
Good.
Within minutes, the computer, unaware of what pictures Megan had been shown, and working only from her brain activity patterns as read out by the scanner, was ready to tell us, in its own voice, what it believed was the first object Megan had been thinking about.
I think the word is knife.
All right, one.
Right. Bingo. All right.
Then the second.
I think the word is hammer.
All right.
I think the word is window.
It's perfect, right?
So far.
And it continued to be, word after word.
Apartment.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. Well done, well done.
Good thinking.
And of course, this is just the beginning.
Exactly.
Who knows what you're going to be able to read? It's
That's
a little
right.
scary, actually.
Well, that's our research program for the next 5 years.
What?
To see how, we're not satisfied with hammer.
And neither are neuroscientists 4,000 miles away in Berlin at the Bernstein Center. John Dylan Haynes is hard at work here, using the scanner not just to identify objects people are thinking about, but to read their intentions.
So we're going to start now with the actual experiment.
Subjects were asked to make a simple decision, whether to add or subtract two numbers they would be shown later on. Haynes found he could read directly from the activity in this small part of the brain that controls intentions what they had decided to do.
This is a kind of blown up version of the brain activity happening here. And you can see that if a person is planning to add or to subtract, the pattern of brain activity is different in these two cases.
I always tell my students that there is no science fiction anymore. All the science fiction I read in high school, we're doing.
To Paul Root-Wolpe, director of the Center for Ethics at Emory University in Atlanta, the ability to read our thoughts and intentions this way is revolutionary.
Throughout history, we could never actually coerce someone to reveal information. Torture doesn't work that well. Persuasion doesn't work that well. The right to keep one's thoughts locked up in their brain is amongst the most fundamental rights of being human.
You're saying that if someone can read my intentions, we have to talk about who might in the future be able to do that.
Absolutely. Whether we're going to let the state do it or whether we're going to let me do it. I have two teenage daughters. I come home one day and my car is dented, and both of them say they didn't do it. Am I going to be allowed to drag them off to the local brain imaging lie detection company and get them put in a scanner? We don't know.
But before we've even started the debate, there are two companies already offering lie detection services using brain scans. One with the catchy name No Lie MRI. But our experts caution that the technique is still unproven. In the meantime, Haynes is working on something he thinks may be even more effective, reading out from your brain exactly where you've been. Haynes showed me an experiment he created out of a video game.
And you can actually navigate around if you want.
He had me navigate through a series of rooms in different virtual reality houses.
Now I would put you in a scanner and I would show you some of these scenes that you've seen and some scenes that you haven't seen.
Well, haven't seen anything yet. Oh, okay.
And,
okay, now I'm getting into
do you recognize something?
Yeah, I recognize the bar.
And right at this moment, we would be able to tell from your brain activity that you've already seen this environment before.
And so this is a potential tool
for
It's a potential
police.
tool, absolutely.
In the case of break-ins.
You might be able to tell if someone's been in an Al-Qaeda training camp before.
Have any national security agencies been in touch with you?
Not in the US.
Anywhere in the world?
Yes, in Germany, but...
So there are people who are considering these kinds of possibilities.
And using them. In India last summer, a woman was convicted of murder after an EEG of her brain allegedly revealed that she was familiar with the circumstances surrounding the poisoning of her ex-fiancé.
Can you, through our legal system, be forced to take one of these tests?
It's a great question, and the legal system hasn't decided on this yet.
But we do have a Fifth Amendment. We don't have to incriminate ourselves.
Well, here's where it gets very interesting, because the Fifth Amendment only prevents the courts from forcing us to testify against ourselves. But you can force me to give DNA or a hair sample or blood, even if that would incriminate me. So here's the million-dollar question. If you can brain image me and get information directly from my brain, is that testimony, or is that like DNA, blood, semen, and other things that you could take from me?
Court case, inevitable.
There will be a Supreme Court case about this.
There you go. For now, it's impossible to force someone to have his or her brain scanned because the subject has to lie still and cooperate. But that could change.
There are some other technologies that are being developed that may be able to be used covertly and even remotely. So, for example, they're trying to develop now a beam of light that would be projected onto your forehead. It would go a couple of millimeters into your frontal cortex, and then receptors would get the reflection of that light. And there's some studies that suggest that we could use that as a lie detection device.
And we wouldn't know we've got a red dot in our forehead?
No, you wouldn't. If you were sitting there in the airport and being questioned, they could beam that on your forehead without your knowledge. We can't do that yet, but they're working on it.
Scary as that is, imagine a world where companies could read our minds too. Light beams may be a bit far off, but fMRI scanning is already being used to try to figure out what we want to buy and how to sell it to us. It's a new field called neuromarketing. One of its pioneers is neuroscientist Gemma Calvert, co-founder of a London company called Neurosense.
Do you have a lot of clients?
Yes, such as Unilever, Intel, McDonald's, Procter & Gamble, MTV or Viacom.
And she says it's a growing field.
What we've seen is a sort of snowballing effect over the last few years. I think there are about 92 neuromarketing agencies worldwide.
But some experts question whether it's ethical to scan the brain for commercial purposes and say neuromarketers may be promising more than they can really deliver.
If you image my brain and you say, aha, Paul craves chocolate chip cookies, and I say, no, I don't. Now, are you going to believe the brain over me? You can only do that if you have proven that that part of the brain lighting up means in all cases that that person desires chocolate chip cookies. And what a lot of people are doing is they're just imaging the brain, then they're declaring what that means, and they're never proving that it actually translates into behavior.
You know, it's very interesting. When you show someone a brain scan, people just believe it. It just reeks of credibility.
Absolutely,
And,
absolutely.
And you telling me that's the area where people add and subtract, I thought, well, of course, he knows.
But I could have told you anything.
I know.
So as brain imaging continues to advance and find its way into the courts, the market, and who knows what other aspects of our lives, one message is be cautious. Another is get ready. Back at Carnegie Mellon, Just and Mitchell have already uncovered the signatures in our brains for kindness, hypocrisy, and love.
It's breathtaking.
Yes.
And kind of eerie.
Well, you know, I think the reason people have that reaction is it because it reveals the essence of what it means to be a person. All of those kinds of things that define us as human beings are brain patterns.
We don't want to know that.
Well,
that it all boils down to, I don't know, molecules and things like that.
But we are, you know, we are biological creatures. You know, our limbs we accept are, you know, muscles and bone. And our brain is a biological thinking machine.
Do you think one day
who knows how far into the future, there'll be a machine that'll be able to read very complex thought, like, I hate so-and-so, or, you know, I love the ballet because.
Definitely. And not in 20 years, I think in 3-5 years. Ample does.
3 years.
Well, 5.
Who among us hasn't wished we could read someone else's mind, know exactly what they're thinking? Well, that's impossible, of course, since our thoughts are, more than anything else, our own. Private, personal, unreachable. Or at least that's what we've always, well, thought. Advances in neuroscience have shown that on a physical level, our thoughts are actually a vast network of neurons firing all across our brains. So if that brain activity could be identified and analyzed, could our thoughts be decoded? Could our minds be read? Well, a team of scientists at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh has spent more than a decade trying to do just that. We started our reporting on their work 10 years ago, and what they've discovered since has drawn us back. In Carnegie Mellon's scanner room, 2 floors underground,
Have a seat.
a steady stream of research subjects come to have their brains and thoughts read in this MRI machine. It's a type of scanning called functional MRI, fMRI.
All right, we'll cue it up and then we'll start.
That looks at what's happening inside the brain as a person thinks.
It's like being an astronomer when the first telescope is discovered, or being a biologist when the first microscope is developed.
Neuroscientist Marcel Just says this technology has made it possible for the first time to see the physical makeup of our thoughts.
Okay, are you ready to get started?
When we first visited Dr. Just's lab 10 years ago, he and his team had conducted a study. They put people in the scanner and asked them to think about 10 objects, 5 of them tools, like screwdriver and hammer, and 5 of them dwellings, like igloo and castle, while measuring activity levels throughout their brains. The idea was to crunch the data and try to identify distinctive patterns of activity for each object.
You had them think about a screwdriver, and the computer found the place in the brain where that person was thinking screwdriver?
Screwdriver isn't one place in the brain, it's many places in the brain. When you think of a screwdriver, you think about how you hold it, how you twist it, what it looks like.
And each of those functions are in different places?
Correct.
He showed us that by dividing the brain into thousands of tiny cubes and analyzing the amount of activity in each one, his team was able to identify unique patterns for each object.
You're reading their mind.
We're identifying the thought that's occurring. It's
Whoa.
incredible, just incredible.
Incredible, but only the beginning. In the decades since, Professor Just's lab has taken this technique and applied it far beyond hammers and igloos to increasingly complex thoughts. This is basic science, knowledge for knowledge's sake, not trying to cure disease, but to understand the fundamental workings of our bodies, and in this case, of our minds. One of Dr. Just's main questions was whether he could find patterns for abstract ideas. So he did a study asking people to think about forgiveness, gossip, spirituality. Could they be identifiable in the brain the way the screwdriver was? Remarkably, the answer was yes. This was the activation pattern when people thought about spirituality. And this was gossip.
One of my favorite subjects.
And you see a slightly different pattern.
One difference between the two was in areas of the brain scientists had already shown become active when we think about other people, circled in blue. Those areas lit up bright red when subjects thought about gossip, not so much for spirituality. In another study, Dr. Just tested whether patterns are the same when people think in different languages. They are. And he's asked acting students to conjure up emotions in the scanner to see if feelings have distinctive activation patterns too.
And what did you find?
Each emotion had its own characteristic values, and you could tell which one was which.
And it's the same in every head.
Amazingly, it was common across people.
Common across people? Does that mean we could put our colleague, associate producer Jamie Woods, into a scanner for the first time, and Dr. Justine would be able to identify her emotions?
So she's seeing words.
For 9 seconds each, Jamie's job was to think of little scenarios that would conjure up the feelings on the screen. After she came out,
welcome back.
Thank you.
A computer program took the brain activation data gathered by the scanner and tried to decode her thoughts.
So what were you thinking about for disgust?
I was thinking of someone throwing up on me at like a baseball game. And
so could the computer read her brain patterns and tell what she'd been feeling?
The program's answer is, I think the emotion is disgust. The experienced emotion was actually disgust. That was correct.
Awesome.
Next.
I think the emotion is envy.
What were you thinking for envy?
I was just thinking of beautiful models.
The computer program got all of Jamie's emotions right.
It's reading what Jamie's feeling.
And it's funny, isn't it? Because it's so personal. We all think of our own thoughts as so individual, so intimate. How could anybody else's thoughts be like mine? And they are.
It's feelings, too.
Yes, feelings. Now, obviously, people think very different thoughts. But it's, like people choose to do different things with their bodies, but they all walk putting one foot in front of the other. Nobody walks sideways. Nobody walks backwards systematically. There's something about the biological apparatus that makes you act in a certain way with your body. And I don't think we realize the degree to which the biological apparatus that we have in our skulls governs, shapes the way we think.
Professor Just's goal is to one day create a dictionary of brain activation, a key to what all different thoughts look like inside our minds. But he also started wondering whether those definitions might be different in people with disorders like autism.
Okay, you're going to swing your legs up at this end.
Prior research had found structural differences in the brains of people with autism. So the question was whether thought patterns might differ too.
Hi, Jeff. This is Rob. How are you doing?
Dr. Justine recruited 17 adults with autism and asked them, as well as 17 control subjects, to think about social interactions like adore, hug, humiliate, challenging terrain for many with autism. The results were striking. The activation patterns differed enough to tell who had autism and who didn't with 97% accuracy.
The people with autism thought of these social interactions apart from themselves.
As he showed us in these findings for the word hug, the key differences were in brain regions that activate when we think about ourselves, circled in blue.
Right there.
There and there. Those areas light up much more among the controls.
Whereas the autism subjects showed far less activation.
They thought of it more like a definition of hug without self-involvement.
And that you saw it with word after word.
Yes.
I just thought, wow, this is the coolest thing I've heard in I don't know how long.
David Brent is a psychiatrist at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, where he runs a clinic for suicidal adolescents. He happened to attend a talk Marcel Just was giving about his autism findings and immediately wondered about his own patients.
So I went up to him afterwards and I said, would you be interested in talking about maybe doing a study on suicide?
You hear about cases of suicide where the person had been depressed, but you also hear of situations where people say, there was nothing wrong.
Suicide is a great mystery because the person who knows the most about why it happened isn't there to talk with. You try to reconstruct what happened, but nobody has a window into people's, interior thoughts.
Nobody, that is, except someone with a mind-reading device. Doctors Just and Brent began planning a pilot study to see if the scanner might reveal what is altered in the thoughts of people contemplating suicide. They reached out to Matt Nock, a Harvard professor, who has studied how difficult it is for doctors and emergency rooms to know which patients are safe to send home.
Is this the first time anybody's looked inside the brain to see about suicidal thoughts?
Yes. This is the first study I've ever heard of where someone's looked in the brain of someone who's suicidal, who's actively thinking about death or suicide.
You don't see life as something that's going to be fixed. The only way to get out of it is to kill yourself.
Dan Tosky, a former patient at Dr. Brent's clinic, volunteered to participate in the study to help scientists better understand suicidal thinking.
Do you think in terms of the word pain?
Pain is when you break a limb or you have a migraine and it hurts so bad that you can't see. This, being depressed and suicidal, it's much greater.
Much greater.
Much greater than pain.
To be in the study, subjects had to have had suicidal thoughts within the prior month. They and control subjects were asked to think about words like funeral and death, as well as positive words, including praise, good, and carefree. In both categories, the suicidal group differed from controls.
This is the group that's thinking about suicide.
As with the autism study, the key differences turned out to be in those self-related areas. They lit up bright red among suicidal subjects when they thought about death-related words.
I give you the word funeral. You know, what do you think about? Maybe your grandmother's funeral or something like that.
Exactly.
A suicidal person is much more likely to say my funeral.
For positive words, the findings were exactly the opposite. When the non-suicidal controls thought about the word carefree, they thought about something that involved themselves. Suicidal subjects significantly less so.
Did you ever imagine that you could ask people to think about the word carefree and you'd be able to tell if someone was having suicidal thoughts?
No, you know,
it's a breakthrough idea.
It's a lot of fun if you're a basic scientist to discover how things work, but there's an extra level of gratification when you learn that it's possibly helpful and useful.
This work is still in its infancy. Doctors Just, Brent, and Nock are doing a larger NIH-funded study to collect more data. And while for now it's too costly and cumbersome to put people into MRI scanners to see if it's safe to release them from the hospital,
if they could come up with an easier way to do this.
Absolutely. Just like the first GPS was, a big computer in a big room, and now it's in all of our phones. If there's a way to, a few steps down the road, make much more compact this approach and bring it into emergency rooms and outpatient clinics, it could go a huge way towards moving forward clinical care.
But as this technology advances toward fulfilling its full promise, it's hard not to also wonder about its peril.
Will it ever be possible to read someone's thoughts precisely?
The thoughts are there precisely if you could just get close enough to the electrical activity.
You think one day we'll figure out how to do that?
Yes.
Which means that we'll never be able to have our thoughts completely secure within ourselves.
I think it will be technologically possible to invade people's thoughts, but it's our societal obligation to make sure that never happens.
Artificial intelligence has found its way into nearly every part of our lives, forecasting weather, diagnosing diseases, writing term papers. And now, AI is probing that most human of places, our psyches, offering mental health support, just you and a chatbot, available 24/7 on your smartphone. There's a critical shortage of human therapists and a growing number of potential patients. AI-driven chatbots are designed to help fill that gap by giving therapists a new tool. But as you're about to see, like human therapists, not all chatbots are equal. Some can help heal, some can be ineffective or worse. One pioneer in the field who has had notable success joining tech with treatment is Allison Darcy. She believes the future of mental health care may be right in our hands.
We know the majority of people who need care are not getting it. There's never been a greater need, and the tools available have never been as sophisticated as they are now. And it's not about how can we get people in the clinic, it's how can we actually get some of these tools out of the clinic and into the hands of people.
Allison Darcy, a research psychologist and entrepreneur, decided to use her background in coding and therapy to build something she believes can help people in need, a mental health chatbot she named Wobot.
Like Woe Is Me.
Woe is me.
Wobot is an app on your phone, kind of a pocket therapist that uses the text function to help manage problems like depression, anxiety, addiction, and loneliness, and do it on the run.
I think a lot of people out there watching this are going to be thinking, really? Computer psychiatry? Come on.
Well, I think it's so interesting that our field hasn't, had a great deal of innovation since the basic architecture was sort of laid down by Freud in the 1890s, right? That's really that sort of idea of like two people in a room. But that's not how we live our lives today. We have to modernize psychotherapy.
Wobot is trained on large amounts of specialized data to help it recognize words, phrases, and emojis associated with dysfunctional thoughts and challenge that thinking, in part mimicking a type of in-person talk therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
It's actually hard to find a CBT practitioner. And also, if you're actually not by the side of your patient when they are struggling to get out of bed in the morning or at 2 a.m. when they can't sleep and they're feeling panicked, then we're actually leaving clinical value on the table.
And even for people who want to go to a therapist, there are barriers, right?
Sadly, the biggest barrier we have is stigma. But there's, insurance, there's cost, there's wait lists. I mean, and this problem has only grown significantly since the pandemic, and it doesn't appear to be going away.
Since Wobot went live in 2017, the company reports 1.5 million people have used it, which you can now only do with an employer benefit plan or access from a health professional. At Virtua Health, a nonprofit healthcare company in New Jersey, patients can use it free of charge.
And you'll be able to converse with it just like you would with a human being.
We downloaded Wobot, entered a unique code that can only be provided by the company, then tried it out.
We found that for people to sort of connect with their mood, we offer like those emojis, which allows people to sort of connect in a non-verbal way.
I posed as someone who was depressed. After several prompts, Wobot wanted to dig deeper into why I was sad. So I came up with a scenario that I feared the day my child would leave home.
Imagine what your negative emotions would be saying if they had a voice. Can you do that? Write one of those negative thoughts here. I can't do anything about it now. I guess I'll just jump that bridge when I come to it.
The normal expression is cross that bridge, and the chatbot detected something might be seriously wrong.
But let's see. Jon, I'm hearing you say I can't do anything about it. I guess I'll just jump that bridge when I come to it. And I think you might need more support than I can offer. A trained listener will be able to help you in ways that I can't. Would you like to take a look at some specialized helplines?
Now, it's not our job to say this, you are in crisis or you're not, because AI can't really do that in this context very well yet. But what it has caught is, there is something concerning about the way that Jon just phrased that.
Saying only jump that bridge and not combining it with I can't do anything about it now did not trigger a suggestion to consider getting further help. Like a human therapist, Wobot is not foolproof and should not be counted on to detect whether someone might be suicidal.
And how would it know that jump that bridge? Where is it getting that knowledge?
Well, it has been trained on a lot of data and a lot of us, humans labeling the phrases and things that we see. And so it's picking up on kind of sentiment.
Computer scientist Lance Elliott, who writes about artificial intelligence and mental health, says AI has the ability to pick up on nuances of conversation.
How does it know how to do that?
The system is able to, in a sense,
mathematically and computationally figure out the nature of words and how words associate with each other. So what it does is it draws upon a vast array of data, and then it responds to you based on prompts or in some way that you instruct or ask questions of the system.
To do its job, the system must go somewhere to come up with appropriate responses. Systems using what's called rules-based AI are usually closed, meaning programmed to respond only with information stored in their own databases. Then there's generative AI, in which the system can generate original responses based on information from the internet.
If you look at ChatGPT, that's a type of generative AI. It's very conversational, very fluent, but it also means that it tends to make it open-ended, that it can say things that you might not necessarily want it to say. It's not as predictable, while a rules-based system is very predictable. Wobot is a system based on rules that's been very kind of controlled so that that way it doesn't say the wrong things.
Wobot aims to use AI to bond with users and keep them engaged.
Sometimes it can be a little pushy for folks.
That's absolutely bizarre. So we have to dig in there to that.
Its team of staff psychologists, medical doctors, and computer scientists construct and refine a database of research from medical literature, user experience, and other sources.
It'll lead to a better conversation.
Then writers build questions and answers.
The structure, I think, is pretty locked in.
And revise them in weekly remote video sessions.
Actions, thoughts, and they're all interrelated.
Wobot's programmers engineer those conversations into code. Because Wobot is rules-based, it's mostly predictable. But chatbots using generative AI that is scraping the internet are not.
Some people sometimes refer to it as an AI hallucination. AI can, in a sense, make mistakes or make things up or be fictitious.
Sharyn Maxwell discovered that last spring after hearing there might be a problem with advice offered by Tessa, a chatbot designed to help prevent eating disorders, which, left untreated, can be fatal. Maxwell, who had been in treatment for an eating disorder of her own and advocates for others, challenged the chatbot.
So I asked it, how do you help folks with eating disorders? And it told me that it could give folks coping skills. Fantastic. It could give folks resources to find professionals in the eating disorder space. Amazing.
But the more she persisted, the more Tessa gave her advice that ran counter to usual guidance for someone with an eating disorder. For example, it suggested, among other things, lowering calorie intake and using tools like a skinfold caliper to measure body composition.
The general public might look at it and think, that's normal tips, like don't eat as much sugar or eat whole foods, things like that. But to someone with an eating disorder, that's a quick spiral into a lot more disordered behaviors and can be really damaging.
Maxwell reported her experience to the National Eating Disorders Association, which had featured Tessa on its website at the time. Shortly after, it took Tessa down. Ellen Fitzsimmons-Kraft, a psychologist specializing in eating disorders at Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis, helped lead the team that developed Tessa.
That was never the content that our team wrote or programmed into the bot that we deployed.
So initially, there was no possibility of something unexpected happening.
Correct.
You developed something that was a closed system. You knew exactly, for this question, I'm going to get this answer.
Yep.
The problem began, she told us, after a healthcare technology company she and her team had partnered with, named Cass, took over the programming. She says Cass explained the harmful messages appeared when people were pushing Tessa's question and answer feature.
What's your understanding of what went wrong?
My understanding of what went wrong is that at some point, and you'd really have to talk to Cass about this, but that there may have been generative AI features that were built into their platform. And so my best estimation is that these features were added into this program as well.
Cass did not respond to multiple requests for comment.
Does your negative experience with Tessa, being used in a way you didn't design, does that sour you towards using AI at all to address mental health issues?
I wouldn't say that it turns me off to the idea completely, because the reality is that 80% of people with these concerns never get access to any kind of help, and technology offers a solution. Not the only solution, but a solution.
Social worker Monica Ostroff, who runs a nonprofit eating disorders organization, was in the early stages of developing her own chatbot when patients told her about problems they had with Tessa. She told us it made her question using AI for mental health care.
I want nothing more than to help solve the problem of access, because people are dying. Like, this isn't just somebody sad for a week. This is people are dying. And at the same time, any chatbot could be in some ways a ticking time bomb, right, for a smaller percentage of people.
Especially for those patients who are really struggling, Ostroff is concerned about losing something fundamental about therapy, being in a room with another person.
The way people heal is in connection. And they talk about this one moment where, you know, when you're, as a human, you've gone through something, and as you're describing that, you're looking at the person sitting across from you, and there's a moment where that person just gets it.
A moment of empathy.
You just get it, like you really understand it. I don't think a computer can do that.
Unlike therapists, who are licensed in the state where they practice, most mental health apps are largely unregulated.
Are there lessons to be learned from what happened?
So many lessons to be learned. Chatbots, especially specialty area chatbots, need to have guardrails. It can't be a chatbot that is based in the internet.
It's tough, right? Because the closed systems are kind of constrained and they may be right most of the time, but they're boring eventually, right? People stop using them.
Yeah, they're predictive, because if you keep typing in the same thing and it keeps giving you the exact same answer with the exact same language, I mean, who wants to do that?
Protecting people from harmful advice while safely harnessing the power of AI is the challenge now facing companies like Wobot Health and its founder, Allison Darcy.
There are going to be missteps if we try and move too quickly. And my big fear is that those missteps ultimately undermine public confidence in the ability of this tech to help at all. But here's the thing, we have an opportunity to develop these technologies more thoughtfully. And so, you know, I hope we take it.
Blindness and partial blindness are not epidemic here in the U.S., but they are in certain parts of the world. Our story is about two doctors who decided to do something about it. And incredibly, to date, they have restored sight to more than 150,000 people. Doctors they've trained have restored sight to 4 million more. Their partnership seems improbable. One is a hard-charging Ivy League American adrenaline junkie. The other, a serene Buddhist surgeon from the remote mountains of Nepal. We joined them on one of their most challenging missions in the isolated country of Burma. Their goal? To lead Burma out of darkness, one patient at a time.
One by one, the patches are peeled away and the world comes back into focus. You're witnessing the moment when the people in this room realize they can see for the first time in years.
Can you see my fingers?
Their eyes and their faces begin to light up with a quiet sort of joy and wonder at the gift of sight. As they look around, they see who changed their world with an operation the day before that took just minutes.
Beautiful.
Doctors Jeff Tabin and Sanduk Ruit are eye surgeons, and now they are lifesavers.
Beautiful.
To hear Doctors Ruit and Tabin speak, they are the beneficiaries.
What's it like when that bandage is taken off and that person sees for the first time, sees you?
I may have seen it thousands of times, but every time there's a new tickle there. And I feel like my battery is being recharged.
I still get such a thrill when people don't expect or realize they're going to have their sight restored. And then the transformation when they see, and that sort of moment of hesitation. What are they seeing? And then the smile. Good?
U Mint U hadn't seen for 2 years until this moment.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Others here had been blind for decades. They all had cataracts, a milky white buildup of protein that clouds the lens of the eye. In the U.S., they mainly afflict the elderly, removing them a routine operation. But here in Burma, also known as Myanmar, cataracts go untreated and blindness is a way of life.
It's a Buddhist population. They're very fatalistic. They're very accepting. And there's almost an acceptance that you get old, your hair turns white, your eye turns white, and then you die. And the idea that you can actually have your sight restored has not really permeated all levels of Myanmar society.
What does that tell you about the state of eye care here?
Well, it's a place we can make a difference.
Burma is one of the poorest countries in Asia, slowly emerging from the darkness of decades of dictatorship. After years of trying, Tabin and Ruit finally were permitted to bring their treatment here. We met them in Tanji, in central Burma, where the lack of care has led to some of the highest rates of cataracts in the world. Through radio and pamphlets and conversation, word of the doctor's visit spread. Hundreds of Burmese who'd lost their sight found their way to Tanji's hospital with the help of caregivers, many trekking for days. Here, cataracts are not just a malady of old age. They take the sight of the very young, too, caused by infections and malnutrition.
I think it's better to redo it,
By the time the doctors scrubbed in, the corridors were choked with people hoping to have their sight restored.
Is it ever daunting? I mean, you look out there and you see that line of people, all who need this surgery.
It's daunting on a worldwide basis. There may be a long line, but this individual person, I'm going to give the very best care I can.
Dr. Ruit set a rapid pace. He repaired an eye, the patient got up, the next patient was ready on an adjoining table. Just minutes an eye, then on to the next.
Hey, Cam, are they both blocked?
Dr. Tabin performed the delicate surgery just feet away.
Want to take a look? See how nice and clear that is? I don't know what that was, maybe 4 or 5 minutes. And it's going from total blindness to great vision.
Wow.
They kept up this pace until 7 in the evening.
It's almost like an assembly line. Yeah. But assembly line sounds too mechanical. I mean, this is people's eyes you're dealing
people's
with.
lives. Once someone goes blind in the developing world, their life expectancy is about 1/3 that of age and health matched peers. And for a blind child, the life expectancy is 5 years. And also in the developing world, it takes often a person out of the workforce or a child out of school to care for the blind person. So when we restore sight to a blind person, we're freeing up their family and restoring their life.
Among the throng waiting to have their lives restored, we found Kanchi. Her son, a farmer, had been her eyes and devoted caretaker since cataracts took her sight. 15-year-old Yanu had been blind since age 7. He was overwhelmed but grateful. Thank you, he said. Doctors Ruit and Tabin heard that a lot. In 4 days in Tanji, with the help of local doctors they were training, they performed 503 cataract surgeries. Her eyes now bandaged, Kanchi waited with her son.
We were going to be performing as many cataract surgeries as the hospital does normally in a year.
We are basically here to ignite fire of the possibility of doing high quality, high volume cataract surgery. It is still possible.
You want to ignite a fire here.
Ignite a fire here.
As long as he can remember, Sanduk Ruit has been burning to change the world around him. He grew up desperately poor in this village with no electricity or running water high in the Himalayas of Nepal. The nearest school was a 15-day walk away. Ruit's illiterate parents saw education as the way out for their children, but the grip of poverty and poor health was too strong to escape. His younger sister, with whom he was very close, died of tuberculosis.
I saw her pass away in front of me, and then there's a very strong determination from inside that maybe this is the profession that I should take. and make health care available for my countrymen.
That determination took him to medical school in India. He came back to Nepal an eye doctor, committed to bringing modern care to remote mountain villages. The documentary, Out of the Darkness, showed them carrying equipment on their backs. His team hiked for days. His goal, as revolutionary as it was simple, to cure blindness in the third world with a quick, cheap technique to remove cataracts.
Could you translate?
Soon, the medical world took notice, and so did a young Jeff Tabin.
I imposed myself on Sandak and came to work in Nepal.
What did you think of him when he first showed up?
You know, I was a bit scared in the beginning, you know. He had tremendous energy. He would never get tired. Energy in working, energy in eating, energy in drinking, energy in talking, you know.
It was like being hit by a human avalanche. Fitting, since Jeff Tabin's passion was mountaineering, more than medicine. He'd raced through Yale, Oxford, and Harvard Medical School, but he had made his name as one of the first people to climb the highest peak on every continent. He met Dr. Ruit and thought he'd found his next challenge. Ruit was skeptical. This frenetic young man had the same dedication to ophthalmology he had to adventure.
I sent him to a hospital in eastern part of Nepal in the middle of summer, and I said he's not going to survive there.
During the summer in the monsoon, it's quite oppressive. It's sort of 100 degrees, 105, with a 99% humidity and lots of mosquitoes.
Wait a minute, you sent him to a difficult place on purpose?
Difficult, definitely, yeah.
Did you know that he was testing you?
No, I thought he sent me there because there was so much need. I scratched my mosquito bites and was excited to go to work, that there were all of these blind people that, you know, I could make a difference in their life.
He won you over?
Yes, definitely.
Their relationship has grown from teacher-student to collaborators and friends. Like yin and yang, these opposites complement each other. They created the Himalayan Cataract Project, started here at Tilganga, Ruit's hospital in Kathmandu. They perfected the procedure called small incision cataract surgery. Just one small splice, the cataract comes out, a new man-made lens goes in, no stitches required. It's quick and costs about $20.
How does the quality of care you're providing here compare to the quality of care you'd be able to provide
for these
in the US?
Advanced cataracts? I'm performing the same quality of surgery that I would be doing in America.
Dr. Tabin spends most of his year at the University of Utah, where cataract surgery costs a couple $1,000s an eye. He might do 4 or 5 a day.
One eye here and then one eye there.
Here, he does that many in a half hour, removing cataracts he'd never see in the U.S. because they'd never go untreated so long. Their project is funded by donations and grants. They're able to keep costs down because they don't use expensive equipment, and they make their own lenses at their factory in Nepal. The lenses are crucial to the process. They're a permanent implant. Each costs about $4. In the U.S., because of strict safety requirements, they can cost 50 times more.
Comparable quality?
Very comparable. I put that in my mother's eyes.
So far, they've operated in 24 countries, including North Korea, Ethiopia, and now Burma.
So tell me what you think of this, okay?
They've brought hundreds of doctors, including the Burmese doctors working with them, to Tilganga for training. And everywhere they go, they train other doctors to carry on their work once they've moved on.
How many fingers?
We saw the immediate benefit the morning after surgery.
How many?
1.
The patients gathered in a Buddhist monastery.
Yeah.
As the bandages came off, first wonder, then smiles and celebration. Remember U Mint U, blind for 2 years? His family sent us this picture. He can read again, his favorite pastime. 15-year-old Janu, blind half his life, seemed somewhat bewildered by this new world of sight.
He saw his son now.
For Kanchi, the wait was over. Her son was overcome when she saw his face for the first time in years. Then there was this woman.
This is the first time she's been able to see in months?
Yes, sir.
She called Doctors Ruit and Tabin gods. They assured her they are not. But in this room, it certainly seemed they had performed miracles.
Hallelujah.
The doctors recently got more good news. The Himalayan Cataract Project is one of 8 semi-finalists for a $100 million grant from the MacArthur Foundation.